All right, so we are live. What's happening, Dan?
Not too much. How are you?
Good, man. Good, man. What's been going on in your world for Pokemon stuff?
Just on that grind, on the eBay grind, trying to unbury myself from all this plastic. Literally, I always say it, I think, but any direction I reach, I can touch hundreds of PSA slabs. There's just piles.
Have you been getting an increase in consignments? How's that been going for you?
The consignments are doing really well. I've got kind of like a core group of just frequent submitters that are just sat on thousands and thousands of slabs, I think. And then I'm getting a new one here and there too. So it's going well.
Excellent.
How about yourself? What's going on lately?
Things are good. Trying to get myself ready for tax season. We were just talking about it briefly before we jumped on.
Always a fun time.
Yeah, just kind of making sure that I've sold enough to cover all of that, figuring out exactly where I need to be. Part of all of this, and I think anyone here who at all relies on Pokemon money can appreciate, is that sales are not always predictable. So, it's I'll think some things will sell and then they won't, and then I won't think some things will sell and they will really quickly. So a lot of sort of that stuff, and I'm just trying to be as prepared as possible months ahead, so there are no surprises for anything for me over the next few months. Also had a couple of friends who are getting married, and they're doing like weddings across the world in different places, so those are going to be expenses as well that I will be like awesome, amazing trips, but added things. So figuring all that out. Yeah.
One bit of tax advice I'll give up front: always pay them. That's the only tax advice I'll always gladly give. Pay them.
Yeah. I will say what I do. I have a CPA and I talk to them and I tell them what's going on and they tell me what to do.
Whatever they tell me I owe, I write that check. I always pay them, or I set up that ACH.
Yep. But it's good to see you. I feel like we haven't talked as much, certainly on YouTube, as we usually do, but I feel like even maybe behind the scenes. So it's good to have a chance just to hang out. I mean, the plan for tonight, if people want to ask us questions, as always, feel free. Otherwise it's mainly just to hang out. We have I think we have a couple of drinks going. Maybe we'll get
I've got Mountain Dew. So I might get the spicy takes coming once I get that sugar high going. I don't have any adult beverages really in the house.
Let's see who's here. Chevels, Imposter Oak, Pokebondo, John Doe, One Pokemon. What's up, everybody? How's everyone doing tonight? Let's see what we got here. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, nothing like super on the top of my mind about the Pokemon world. Anything like come to your mind, things that you really like haven't said to people that you feel like starting with before we jump into questions?
Nothing too crazy. One goal I've set for 2023 is to list every day. I know that eBay had that whole seller summit thing. I actually have a video that I recorded just before this talking about that a little bit. My sales have been really, really solid to start the year. Very short time frame, really hard to say. I know a lot of people have these different mindsets of like, when's a good time of year, when's a bad time of year. It's always hard to judge because like every year I've been doing this, like I've been doing this 8 years, but I'm doing it so much bigger than I ever have full time for the second time to start a year, I guess. And so comparing 2023 against 2022, even back 2018, things like that, it's just not one-to-one. So I've never had like a great grasp on the seasonal changes, honestly, but just for whatever reason, I'm feeling like a big spike lately, whether that's my daily listings, whether the market is just a lot of people shopping. I don't know, Christmas, eBay gift cards, sales are solid though. To start out the year, it's looking really good.
That's good to hear. Yeah. I feel like, from what I've been seeing and prices I've been seeing, I have seen sort of a continued a continued dip on most things, like set wise, slight. I would say it's been like, if we want to go back a year and a half now, we're like most things for our Patreon presentation, like a couple months ago that I did, it was like, 5 to 15%. I'd say now we're like, 7 to 18%. It seems to be slightly dipping. There's some PSA 10s I've seen that have fallen almost like 40% more even after they crashed quite a bit from like random sets like Gym Challenge. And then you have others that have gone up. Like there's some Jungle PSA 10s. There are various PSA 10 first editions across different sets. You have to be careful because a lot of these things only have 2-3 sales. One's a buy it now versus an auction, which can be a humongous difference. And there could have been a few people who were willing to pay $500-$600 more who just didn't see that auction, for example, if it had been in a buy it now. So, I wouldn't read too much into any of that data, but just to tell everyone, that's my sense overall. And so with that, I'm still in the same position of patience, wait for those good deals. Like, the harder stuff that comes up the least is the stuff that seems to be holding the best. And then you have things that are just selling like crazy high that stun me. And it's like, I remember, like, maybe I haven't been watching it closely enough, but like Japanese Worlds promos that like at the height of Logan Paul, I was buying some of those for $400. They're now 6,000, 5,000. They're just like some sneaky, insane things that like, and then there were like, like other Japanese, like Pikachu promos, like some Japanese, like Charizard, like they're just sneaky things. And then there's the, some of the waifu, like full art Japanese cards that aren't necessarily now at their all-time highs, but have definitely gotten to their all-time highs like over the last 6 months.
Yep.
A lot of them. Interesting market. Interesting market.
Obviously, English boxes are as hot as ever. I mean, you've got Evolving Skies going north of 300. You've got every set is above 100. Battle Styles now, I think on TCG players above 100. I mean, Chilling Rain 120, 130. You've got Silver Tempest, which just came out, doing north of 120, I believe. It's wild.
It seems like stuff that people are ripping and opening, and like super niche Japanese stuff, seem to be, and seem to have been sort of the things that have either held or gone up the most in the last little bit. What do you make of all that stuff? Does that surprise you? Is that, what are your reactions to price movements?
The Japanese promos specifically, like I sold a lot of those over the past 3 months, and there are some of them that I sold 3 months ago for like 2K that I just recently sold for 6K the other day. It's like doubled, tripled in the span of a few months. I don't really know. It's one of those things that's hard to source more. I do have a little bit of quantity, a little bit of inventory, but it's almost like scary to say this, but on certain cards, it almost feels 2020-ish. It feels like I only have a few left. I can't really quickly source them and turn them around. Not because PSA is not accessible, because I mean, finding the sealed packs, eBay's fairly dry because people have just bought them all, seeing what the individual promos are doing.
Yeah.
But like I don't feel like those cards can go 10, 20, 30K, anything like that. Like, I don't think they have a double in them left, but it's always like trying to figure out like that. And these ones aren't as bad as like, it doesn't feel, in some ways on the way up, it feels like the Pikachu, it feels like the Eevee, but I can't see the bottom dropping out as bad. It's really hard to say though. Really, really hard to say.
Yeah, like I feel like it easily could drop as bad, but for a very different reason. You know what I mean? And that it's not the same situation where you're like, okay, I have hundreds of these under my bed, and I'm going to be grading hundreds, and I just don't believe there are hundreds more who are going to buy it at that price. This is more of a like okay, like even if like 20% more of these hit the market, it still feels like that could have the price, because I don't trust how deep the market is for them, if that makes sense. It's like a very different situation. I feel that way about a lot of like the mid-gen PSA 10s as well. It's like, I'm not expecting a unlimited, or first edition common and uncommon situation on those, or like an evolutions, situation with like the Charizard. with the amount of supply kind of pushing those down. I'm just concerned about how much people are willing to pay the premiums because of those like insanely low pops. And even if they get like, only like a little more, just like how much is the depth, and totally unanswerable. Neither of us know what the demand is. It's why demand is that tricky part that's just like so hard to predict.
Yeah. And those cards, like obviously the Pikachu and the Eevee, literal millions of copies out there. These cards, maybe it's 1,000. It's hard to say. Years where there were competitive, it's actually public information how many competitors were at each, but some of the staff would get not only the staff card, but they'd get multiple competitors packs as well. So best estimate is that every successive year after the year they started, there's probably more. There's probably more every successive year because it grew.
Yeah.
But 2022, it could be 2,000 or 3,000. 2014-ish, it could be 500 to 1,000-ish. It's hard to say.
I'll be honest, I've been selling into it because I also fear there's more of these in Japan and other places than people realize. I think also when like, and not even necessarily the world's promos, but also selling some of like just my PSA 10 like Japanese promos and my Japanese set cards. I'm a little bit concerned with Japan opening up their PSA site finally, and how many Japanese people are going to like start grading and maybe even trying to sell into the Western market, or even just the populations themselves exploding, just changing people's sort of attitudes to some of these cards. If that happens, I mean, I think it's very much a nobody knows, how much demand there's going to be there for graded cards. Like historically, it's been like they don't really grade cards, but like, is that because they really haven't had like, an option that has increased the value? And people who do grade a lot of cards, they're like a guy like Tsunagu sells them all to the West. He doesn't sell them there, a lot of them there. So it's kind of interesting. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but I think that's if I was very in the Japanese market, I'd be sort of watching closely to see. I don't know how you can accurately predict anything with that, but I think that could be a factor, like one way or another, in either increasing demand with bringing more people from that market integrated cards, or just increasing supply without really increasing demand too much, which would be obviously hurt that part of the market.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, I've been back in the hobby for 8 going on 9 years now, but I didn't get too into Japanese the early years, but I did periodically look at some of the international sites, and each successive year you've seen more and more PSA results, right? When you do searches, and I forget the exact timing of it, but a couple years now, maybe a year or two now, they've had the whole middleman situation where they could send in, it would ship across the seas, and then it would be graded and shipped back. Now they have actual grading being done there. So yeah, you'd think that's only going to increase the accessibility. It's going to increase the supply. It's going to decrease the turnaround time. It's going to just make one less hurdle. There might have been some people that were afraid of the 2 international transits. Well, now they don't have to worry about that. It stays domestic to them. What effect that's going to have, how high it's going to be. PSA is grading 1 million a month domestic in the US. Are they going to grade 10,000 a month? Are they going to grade 100,000 a month? Like, no idea what kind of an operation they have there. So kind of just like a wait and see thing, right? It's going to have some effect, but what exactly, impossible to say.
Yeah, people are talking about the Chinese market too, which I think the Chinese market, the Korean market, I think some of these other language markets are interesting as well. If I was just doing Pokemon cards, obviously I do a lot of TCGs and CCGs, so I just cannot do the other languages in Pokemon. If I was just doing Pokemon, I would definitely be more up on that sort of stuff, because there's probably niches there, and there's probably undervalued stuff like in every language and and everywhere, or overvalued that you should be selling into. Yeah, I don't know if I have too much else just off the top of my head before we go into questions. Like, I'm really looking forward to Orlando. It's gonna be super fun. The Collecticon,
like 6 weeks, I think.
Yeah,
crazy. That's gonna come fast.
That'll be really fun to see you and everyone else, or a bunch of guys. If you can't make it to that one, there'll be other ones. I'm
I
doing a
forget. Are you're doing Dallas, or you're not like committed yet? Not
I'm not
positive.
committed to anything, in part because I have now these like all these like weddings and things that I've got going
Yeah.
on. I have to like not commit too far ahead to anything. I feel like Charlotte is highly likely. Also
Mm.
because of the time, like that I have a little bit more time for that one. Um, but Charlotte is the spring or summer, early summer,
Charlotte's toward late summer, early fall.
late
Let me
summer.
look up. Charlotte is September 16th to 17th.
Dallas is pretty early, right?
Dallas is May 6th to 7th.
Yeah, yeah. That one
I'm
will be
like,
tougher.
we're
I want
only doing one section for Dallas, but Nick booked one section. I have one table like earmarked for me. I mean, barring any unforeseen circumstances, I'll be at Dallas. And then
yeah.
Charlotte's my most likely of the remaining.
Nice. Yeah, I'd like to go to Dallas too, for sure. I mean, they're all fun to go to, but yeah, we'll just have to see.
Mm-hmm.
All right. There are some questions now that we can kind of get to. And anytime
And
you want to just like open some packs, man.
yeah, I I have so many slabs in front of me. I would have to like just push a couple hundred PSA 9 and 10 jungle cards to the side to even make room. But I will quickly say
Yeah.
6 weeks is Orlando. 2 weeks. 2 weeks from tomorrow, we're going to do the live monthly meeting. It's my month. I have a couple like small topics I'm working on getting the information together. I don't have like one. I don't know if I'll have a main one or if it'll just be kind of a handful of small things, updating some of my prior. We'll see what ends up happening. But yeah, just want to give a shout to our Patreon. I believe it's linked below. Yeah, it is. So Patreon link below. $10 a month. You get access to a Discord. You get access to over a year's worth of prior monthly Zoom meetings, 3-hour meetings where we do like a deep dive Q&A conversation with a few dozen people, and then all the upcoming, all the future monthlies we do and all that. So just wanted to give that a shout.
Yep, that's a great way to support Dan and I too. Okay. Let's see. Kai wants to know if you can dunk blindfolded while also downing a beer.
I can't even dunk anymore, hardly. I need to like stretch and mentally prepare, physically prepare for like an hour, and I can like throw one down, maybe barely. Pretty pitiful for 6'4", but
Pokédex says, any thoughts on opening a store?
physical store. I know a guy who has not only one but two. Mason Cardinal Gaming. Where'd it go? I have a hoodie. I meant to wear that. I forgot.
No?
I wore it out the other day. I wore it to the post office, so it's upstairs.
Where my hat is. I need to find
But
my hat.
I have a hat somewhere too. I don't know where the hat is, but yeah, I do have some nice Cardinal Gaming merch. That said, I
Basically
don't
turning into,
ever
like full-time employees. We're gonna have the full gear at Collecticon.
Yeah.
I did Joe Cardinal gaming gear. And then we're gonna just scam people left and right with that gear on.
I never intend. Catch 'em All Collectibles is never going brick and mortar. I'm assuming that's what you mean, opening a store. Unless you're talking eBay store, then I'm all about it. It's just a lot. It's, for me, a big part of me leaving my job to do this full time was a step towards freedom, a step towards having more flexibility in my schedule. And a retail store is completely the opposite. Now you've got to have fixed hours. You've got to have certain times. You don't have to be there necessarily, but talk to any business owner of any kind. It's very hard to find good, trustworthy people that you can just completely like hands off, let them run with it. So yeah, it's a lot. A lot of one nice thing Pokemon has too. It's actually not, I guess it's a nice thing for us internet retailers. It's not so nice for the brick and mortars, but you don't have to have a brick and mortar to get access. A little bit of an exception in the time we're currently in, the current climate. Most wholesale distributors are only taking on new clients that are brick and mortar. But yeah, nice thing about Pokemon, back when I started, you get the online thing going, you get it up and running. That's the way that I would recommend anybody who thinks they want to do a brick and mortar. Start online, see how it goes, build it out. And if you think the numbers can make sense, maybe go for it. But the numbers are really big. The overhead is just massive. Start looking at leases, looking at insurance policies, looking at payroll, things like that. Those are my quick thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's nothing I would consider doing like as a moneymaker. It would be
Labor
like
of love.
still make money and it's more fun, so it's worth doing. Like that, like
Mhm.
I wouldn't do it very likely if it was like a huge money loser, particularly not until I'm like really, if I feel really comfortable and like, very financially free, then maybe. But I could see a scenario where like you could make it work. You could still make some money. It would be a lot of effort, a lot of work, and you'd be making less money, but it could be worth it for the fun of having that store and the community, and maybe there would be ways of making it not too much competitive with an online space. But I do think you would need to probably add a very strong social media element to it, and a sort of a strong sort of like very strong local community that really shops there and goes there and like supports it probably to make it work.
And I will say, two very well-known individuals in the PokeTube space, I think, Rusty and Rudy from Alpha Investments and TCA Gaming, two guys that had brick and mortars of some sort. Rudy's wasn't quite as fleshed out, not as in depth, and his was more timed with the pandemic. But yeah, two guys that are doing big things in the space, had brick and mortars to some extent for some period of time. And as far as I understand, I don't think Rudy has his anymore. Rusty definitely doesn't. And they both have a little bit of content talking about it. And so if those guys tried it and then got out of it for whatever reason, that just kind of tells you their drive, their business acumen, all the things they have going, and they opted to get done with it. So
I didn't know Rudy didn't have a store anymore.
He hasn't shown it in a video in a long time. So I'm assuming he doesn't anymore. I could be wrong though.
Yeah, I know the Rusty, did, and then long time ago now. That was like many years ago, I think, right? When he stopped.
Yeah, because his was definitely pre-pandemic. I don't remember the exact timing, but he definitely has some videos in his backlog about it, and periodically he's asked about it in Q&As and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Just bought the Max for the new Scarlet and Violet set. The ETBs from Pokemon Center anyway, so excited. Do you think they'll hold value?
Hold value. The Max, like I think they limit you to 4, maybe like a case of each. So I think they'll do fine. It depends on your I don't know what you mean exactly. Hold value. Will they be worth something in 10 years? Absolutely. I think they'll be worth something. Will they be good risk-adjusted returns investment-wise compared to other things? That's a lot harder question, I guess. But I'm bullish on Pokemon in the long term. So will they hold some amount of value, some reasonable value? I think so. Pretty vague question, pretty vague answer.
So I think I'm going to start being more blunt on these types of questions. And here's what I believe the honest answer is that both Dan and I think that it will hold or go up in value only because that's what all of the sets have been doing. And that's why everyone thinks that. No one really has a good logical argument other than the fact that like Pokemon's popular and they seem not to be printing enough, and people open them up over time, so there's less supply, and there's the gambling element. Like, and I think all of those things are true, but there's no way to figure out how much real long-term demand there is going to be for opening this product versus how much they're going to be printing it. So it's the answer is probably yes until no. And the no is either the demand falls quickly and Pokemon is still printing a bunch, or Pokemon keeps printing more and more over time, and eventually they print enough that the sets don't do what they're doing. And basically everyone is just sort of gambling to a certain extent on that and guessing. But I do think that, I am someone who does not at all like to invest on prices or charts. Like if you tell me, well, this has always gone up, so invest in it, I say, why has it gone up? I need to understand and really see the value and understand in order to invest money into anything. What I will say though, and this is what I've said to people a lot, is that look, you have Evolving Skies at 300. So you have these modern examples of boxes that are holding at these prices and that are this high, right? Now, we have no idea if they can go up at all from there. We have no idea who's going to keep buying it at 300 and who's going to buy it at 350 and 500. The demand could all of a sudden drop off a cliff once it gets to a certain price point. So far, though, we haven't reached that point. People who are buying it are some combination of investing, throwing in a closet. They're having opening channels and they're opening and they're making money off the product. And probably hopefully the majority, let me say hopefully, because really no one has any clue. Hopefully the majority is just like taking it home and opening it right away and enjoying the cards and it's worth $300 for them, either because they can afford it and then it's fun, or they're addicted to it and they shouldn't be spending money, or they think that the cards inside are going to be like good investment pieces and so they're rationalizing it, or some combination of all of those. That is not a thing that I'm comfortable like investing in. Now, speculating with a little extra money that I can afford to lose here and there because it's fun, I think that the odds seem to be in your favor. And obviously, like, I bought a good amount of Evolving Skies at 95. I bought a bunch of Chilling Reign at 68, 70. You know, I waited for the biggest reprint. I bought a bunch of it because I wanted to open it, and because I was speculating that because all of these sets seemed to continue to go up and those prices were so low, I felt like the odds of them getting to 110, 120, 140, 160. Remember, Evolving Skies had already gotten to 160 to 180 before, after that print run, bringing it all the way down to 90. I thought the odds are pretty good that it could get back to that point. Did I think it was going to go to 300? Absolutely not. I think it's crazy. If you're asking me, do I think that box should be 300? I think people are crazy. But that's one man's honest, subjective opinion. At the end of the day, there are modern Star Wars products that sell for $400, $500 out of the gate. Marvel products that sell for $400, $500. Now, it's a different market. It's a much smaller niche market. There's also a lot less product. There are sports boxes that are selling for $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 out of the gate. So it's sort of arbitrary. It's all supply and demand at the end of the day. But if you don't know the supply and you don't know the demand, you, like everyone else, are just guessing in the wind. Is really what's happening. Now, again, you know, just to repeat it, it's like, if you have a lot of price history in your favor and you have a wide margin of probable success rate. For example, like if you're buying a modern Japanese booster box and you can see that like a set like Pokekaion or CP6 got to 1,500 to 2,000, it's like thinking that it's going to go to that might be crazy, but thinking it might go to 200 or 300, you know, versus that seems somewhat realistic. However, that could be what a lot of people are thinking. And so a ton of people are buying it at these elevated prices, thinking it's going to jump one more, and then it's not going to. And who is everyone going to sell it to eventually? Or people are opening it and enjoying it. So that's a much broader answer. To be honest with you, Thomas, like, I think it's sick that you bought these. Like, have fun. Like, I'm kind of like, I don't mean to be like a dick. We're not trying to be dicks with our answer, but I think we're talking more about people who are spending, like, you know, tens of thousands or many, many thousands of dollars on this product. Most people, you know, if you're buying like 4 or 5 of each set and you're putting it away and like it's only a small portion of your disposable income, and you're aware that, like, you know, of the risks and the range that it could go to, like, I just think it's cool that you're in the hobby and like you're enjoying yourself. Like, that would be my honest human reaction to like what you're doing. But my blunt sort of speculator investment answer is something like that. What do you think, Dan? Anything to add or agree or disagree with?
Yeah, I think one of the scary things is people stand here today and they look back. Well, they don't really look back. They just say 90 something sets have been made and every booster box is above its release price, right? They look at one point in time, one set of data points for that point in time. I think what's more appropriate is to look at the entire 25-year span and get a feel for what the history has looked like. I was so curious of that answer that I did that a few months ago for our Patreon deep dive, right? Rusty, again, a lot of people probably follow Rusty that follow this channel. Rusty recently did a Wayback Machine video where he showed on Hills Wholesale Gaming that Jungle, Fossil, Rocket, base set boxes were selling for $30 to $40. That just shows you what can happen. If and when Pokemon overshoots, if and when we go from a period of very high demand, very high print runs, down to significantly less demand, significantly less I guess demand at the end of the day. Prices can go down. Prices can and will go down on boxes if a scenario like that happens again. I'm not forecasting for that. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think it's just the wrong thing to look and say everything today is more expensive, so therefore everything in the future will be too. I think at a minimum, you should not only look at today, but you should look at the 25-year history. It's all out there. We have it all. And yeah, I mean, there was a rocky decade in between. Part of that rocky decade helps all of those prices today, right? All the attrition, that's getting into more of the whole vintage versus modern thing, the amount of attrition that some of that product saw. But I feel like I want to do a video at some point, just diving deeper into that concept and really, really just fleshing out the details and the implications of what that means, because it's just way too oversimplified to say everything is higher than when it came out. So I'm going to buy anything as it comes out and it's going to be higher.
Yeah, I mean, tulips had never been as high as they ever had been at the top of the tulip mania bubble. I mean, it's
Yeah.
Yes, any point in time, you can take a look at the last, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and you can do all sorts of price charts and trends, but then the next day you could have an event that had never happened before that dramatically shifts the entire market. That's why it's way more important to think about the potential future demographics of Pokemon. And there's a lot of reasons to be bullish or positive about Pokemon in the long run. So if there wasn't, I would be screaming on this channel telling people that, like, listen, like it's crazy. Like Pokemon's dying. Like people aren't interested in Pokemon. They're not coming out with new things. Like people have lost, there's actual real reasons to believe that Pokemon as a hobby, will continue on into the future and appeal to multiple generations. Now none of that's guaranteed, and we don't know how much it will, but yeah, I mean, it's so far Pokemon has operated on that not every, but for, at least for the last 12 years, every 5 to 6 years, there was a huge surge in demand. The first was around evolutions and was around around Pokemon Go, which was really the central sort of thing. It was Pokemon Go. That's what I think. And the second one was a combination of like 30-year-olds collecting what they wanted when they were 10, and the pandemic with massive stimulus checks, massive amount of money printing, people staying at home, having a lot more time, right? Like, what's going to be the one in 6 years? Maybe there will be one, and maybe there'll be one in 10 years, or maybe it's just going to be more of a gradual sort of growth, or maybe it'll be I think more likely over the next few years, it's going to be a gradual, a little bit of a decline, and then eventually over time will grow. That's sort of what my more bullish case would be. And so it's in the meantime, these things are being bought either by people who are enjoying them and opening up and not thinking of them as investments, or by people who I think are either not thinking about this or are just like, they just are like, it'll just go up, or they're willing to hold for a really long time, or, I don't know. Have a theory, have a thesis generally. Don't tell me that things are as high as they've ever been. It's just not useful. But again, most people who are buying cards are consumers, and we're enjoying the hobby. Most of the time when I am opening, in fact, 99.99% of the time when I'm opening stuff, it is for fun, because I'm a consumer of this hobby and I'm enjoying it. I'm not calling myself an investor as I'm doing that. I'm just appreciating the art and having fun, because money is not the most important thing all the time. All right. Do you have a chase card that is a set card? We could say either of us can answer that. Do I personally have a chase card? Do I have a chase card that's a set card? Am I chasing anything right now? Not in Pokemon at the moment. I'm chasing some other TCGs and hobbies that are set. They're set lots of set cards that I'm chasing. I would say I'm still missing. I don't have a nice copy of a Shining Charizard from Neo Destiny in English. I just have never been able to get a nice copy of that card at a price that I like ever felt comfortable paying. So that's a card that, but again, it's just not a card that I'm like, you know, feel like I need to buy like right now. You know, if it, those are the types of things that I end up often getting in trades, or I end up often buying one when I've just sold a pretty big card. But I look for those types of items to kind of, you know, at Collecticon and other places, sometimes I'll trade one of my bigger items for some smaller items, including items like that I might really want, that help kind of fill in the gap. And that's often how I collect, or I sell something. I'm not for me personally, in my current financial situation, I don't feel comfortable, just to become really blunt, you know, spending $2,000-3,000 out of just, you know, that isn't coming from some other card sort of gain on a card like that, with the idea that it's going to be like investable. You know, at this point, there is a price where I would start buying a bunch of them, though. Like with a lot of this stuff, I can go back. Like right now, I'm really collector mindset in the Pokemon hobby. There are prices where I start to become more like money maker mindset with items. That being said, I'm also not selling a ton. You know, I'm selling a number of doubles and have been over the last year and a half or 2 years, like kind of slowly. But I'm not selling like collector items. I'm also not panicking about the hobby and get enough joy from the hobby not to sell just because I think something like isn't investable. How about for you, Dan? Like any chase set cards that you're trying to find or get?
I did my first 6 years of my journey when I was completely a net buyer, never took really a penny out of the hobby, just poured thousands of hours into it. I did most everything I wanted to do in the set card sphere. But one kind of insane goal that I have that I'm not sure I'll ever even make another attempt towards it. I would love to open a base set first edition Charizard. I've tried twice. I bought a base first edition heavy pack years back for on the scale of several $100s, I want to say. And I pulled a Ninetales that graded the PSA 8. And then I went to Vegas for that box break and I pulled a Magneton. So 2 shots at a Charizard from base first. I've done unlimited several times. I've done fourth print a handful of times. I did the Shadowless in Vegas. So I feel like I need to complete. I need to complete that someday. I'll take another shot at it, but I don't know when and where. Maybe I never will, but because the number is just crazy. Confirmed heavy packs of base set first edition currently are like 10K plus, and that's just a massive gamble. So who knows if I'll ever even take another shot, but that's like just a lofty goal that's always in the back of my mind somewhere. Other than that, though, yeah, nothing too significant. Because I've mostly done like the set card stuff. Definitely some trophy tier type promo, Japanese scarce promo. More goals in that front than set cards.
John says, how do you think this MSRP rise will affect the market sentiment? Do you have any thoughts on that one, Dan?
Cards are expensive. I think they've always been fairly expensive, but this jump, what was it, from 144 to like 160, 15%ish, I think. I'm just trying to go to Pokemon Center quick to confirm the exact amount, but how will it affect the market sentiment? I guess I don't know how it will broadly. Yeah, 161.64 is the new MSRP. How will it broadly affect the market sentiment? I've seen some wild theories out there. Like, will the other boxes kind of inflate to just match the new amount, since that's what it costs to get new products? So will the old ones just kind of lever up 10 to 15% magically to make it all equal? Most of the sets are already doing crazy things as of today. So like most of the sets already have a pretty hefty price given their recency given what sets of that age usually go for historically. But yeah, how that will broadly, I don't really, I guess I don't really have too much on how that will broadly affect market sentiment in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like it's valid that people who just like want to open cheaper product are annoyed by all like the investors who are causing this to happen. Like, now part of it might just be inflation, right? Just the decrease of the value of the dollar overall. But I mean, one thing I talked a lot about, right, is that Pokemon is probably going to try to not leave so much money out there for secondary market people investing in all these modern products. So either that means printing a lot more product, which I think that they've done, or raising the value, right? Raising the price that they're charging their middlemen, and then their middlemen charging the LGSs, and then their LGSs, along the way. It seems like they're doing both. And again, as I said, that may have nothing to do with them trying to capture more of that secondary market. That might just be a purely just like inflationary like costs on their end. Like who knows exactly what's going on. Either way, to answer this question, why I started that way, it's going to cause like some drama and some negativity, and people frustrated with people, and I get that. Hopefully not too much. I do think the hobby is like filled with lots of adults. I think lots of adults are $300. Like no kid, I mean, almost no kids have $300, right? So like, that's crazy. I mean, when my dad bought me a $60 like booster box of sports when I was a kid, I was like over the moon. So I can only imagine, what it would be like having my dad buy me like a $300 box that I heard there was this like $1,000 card that I could hit from it. Like, I can only imagine like the dopamine release and the high that I would have experienced from something like that, because I was like a little addict for $60 boxes and, $2 packs, $3 packs. So there's a lot of adults in the market. Again, if you look at Marvel, you look at Star Wars, you look at, a lot of the Fanatics, some of the Zero Cool stuff, some of, Fanatics lines with these stuff. You look at, Upper Deck with Marvel, some of their other F1, soccer. Like you look at some of these premium products, sports, it ranges from like $400 to thousands of dollars. And then you have like hobby boxes, which don't have or not hobby boxes. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on the terminology, but, boxes you can basically box, like blaster boxes and different sorts of things that you can't actually pull like the best numbered cards, or they're like insanely difficult to pull from those boxes and much easier to pull from the $500 boxes. So it seems to be the way of cards right now for everyone except Magic. Because Magic just seems to be really struggling price-wise. There just doesn't seem to be the demand in the market for that. I'm not sure what's going on with the Kickstarters these days. I know there are a lot of Kickstarters now. I know you and I follow MetaZoo, but there's a bunch of Kickstarters, and I'm not following like all of them.
Yeah.
And kind of like where they're pricing their product and how they're being competitive and how all of that's going to impact everything. But yeah, I mean, the landscape for product that is continuing to be popular and people are interested in, like people are paying really high prices for things. So it doesn't seem surprising. It doesn't seem high given what the secondary market is paying for these, and the investors are willing to pay, and some of the breakers are willing to pay. So, to me, it's crazy, right? Like to me, as a collector and someone who enjoys this stuff, like it's not worth it. It's why, like, the higher this stuff gets, the more vintage Pokemon cards, the more vintage stuff in other hobbies, like the more the low serialized stuff in other hobbies, like the better that looks. Like the more Pokemon prints of modern, and the more sets they release, and the shinier and crazier the cardboard, and the better for me as a collector, like all the other stuff looks. And so I would assume a lot of people would have the same reaction. But it's dangerous to assume too much, like how other people are going to feel and sort of, what that's going to be like. But I do think in the long run, you'll see, when very common, not rare items are extremely expensive, it's just very hard for that to continue to sell. And yes, you have YouTube channels. You have people like PokeRev at 2 million subscribers. You know, you have Pat Flynn getting 3-4 million views on videos where he's, you know, talking about modern cards and showing these cards and giving all this kind of like attention and hype around these cards. And so that can hold it for a certain amount of time. But I just think all of those channels are just going to move on to the next sets. They're going to move, and they're just going to continue to do that over and over again. And all of that attention is just going to move off of the thing. And I don't see how all of that's going to hold, and how there can just be continuously money forever to hold all of that up. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I know Dan completely agrees with all of that, but it just feels like, and meanwhile, like probably we're going to see like unemployment increase this year. Like some of the effects of last year's policies, like are probably going to start trickling, you know, into the economy more this year. Like, you know, it's not like, I just don't see what's going to hold all of this, you know, and all of these Kickstarter, right? Pokemon, like certain things could hold, certain sets could hold. It's just how is it all going to forever, you know, hold? It just feels like, where's all that money going to continue to come from?
Yeah, because every year they're printing several billion new cards, and then you have to under everyone's assumption, you need to maintain every booster box from the past at its prices, every PSA 10, every card. Like, it's a little more understandable, and it's a little more logical that the sealed will continue to perform well for my brain. But then a lot of people have that presumption for the graded cards too. Like, and I know relative to sports, the market caps are so much smaller, all this and that, but still, like, just compounding, add another 3 million graded PSA Pokemon cards to it, add another 500,000 CGC graded Pokemon cards, BGS, and then do all the sealed, do everything. It's just a lot. It's a lot.
And then all of the money that the auction houses are constantly taking out of the economy. eBay is constantly taking out of PSA, all of the different grading card companies, all the collecticons, all the shows that are charging all the vendors, that are charging all the people coming. Like, there's all these businesses that have built up that have an invested interest. And so they're going to help the hobby by advertising it, by getting more people into it. Like, overall, that's a very good thing. But there's also just like a massive amount of overhead and all of that, and money that's constantly coming from collectors, from people who are, you know, and it's just, you just have to hope that it doesn't get too greedy and that it doesn't get too far. And history shows that like humans are incapable of not getting greedy. I mean, even in 2020 in Pokemon, we saw this massive bubble and massive collapse, you know, that was built just like on FOMO and greed, right? Like it's probably inevitable. And then it becomes sort of like, what do you do? How do you navigate that? Et cetera, et cetera. And I do think to Dan's point, like the market caps compared to some of these other hobbies, but, you know, and Dan and I talk about this a lot, like you have to be careful. Just because people have lost their minds on sports cards doesn't mean that a lot of these Pokemon stuff super undervalued. Like, you have to be careful getting into sort of that game of, well, this is $10,000. How can this much better card be 100? Well, it's because that card has been, you know, pumped to the moon and is insane. And you know, this card, you know, maybe it reflects more accurately, you know, what it should be. So again, it's not something that probably most of us have to worry too much about. Most of us are probably spending within our means. Most of us really enjoy what we're collecting and what we're buying. But it is sort of a constant, it's a constant thing that I do feel that Dan and I and probably a lot of other people battle, this sort of sentiment out there, this sort of maybe irrational sort of exuberance that I still feel. But I also run into irrational negativity. Less now. I ran into more of that, like after the bubble burst. I ran into a lot of, and I made videos responding to it, a lot of like, Pokemon's going to go to zero. None of this is any value. Like people it had just gone 60% and now it's going to go to zero. No one likes this stuff type sentiment. And it's sort of like, try to just ground yourself as best you possibly can in some reality that's going to stick over a long period of time. Like, try not to just be too swayed by any, you know, any loud voice or any strong emotion that you feel, you know, because it's normal to panic and to, you know, and then to get over irrationally exuberant, et cetera, irrationally negative. So,
and it's scary how the sentiment is like right now, I thought I had one behind me, but I have the Celebrations one. The Charizard UPC, the fact that it's gone down 50%, people
Yeah.
don't really want it. People don't really care. Like, it's a failed thing. People wanted it when pre-orders were 200, and they
Yeah.
don't want it when it's 100, 90, 80 shipped to your door. I mean, I saw some sales around Black Friday that were
Yeah.
$5, $10, $15 cheaper than my wholesale price. And some people snatch that up. Some people, I mean, I'm kind of like creating this theoretical person that isn't representative of everybody. But and then when Evolving Skies is 300, it's like it just tripled. I want to buy that because we're gonna triple again and triple again. 2020, everyone wanted to buy everything. Not everyone, but like the broader sentiment was like everything's gone up 5x, everything's going to go up 5x again and 5x again. And then when it's down, it's like, yeah, it's headed to zero. I don't want any of this stuff. Like, what is this? It's scary because it should be exactly the opposite, right? Like, it's just kind of scary.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that the one thing to add to that, and this is what I always say, is like Dan is 100% right about that, right? Something we talk about, he and I talk about on our respective channels all the time. Something I talk about, I'm selling $30 cards that I bought a few years ago. I'm selling $150 cards for 5,000 right now. $150 cards I bought at the top of the Logan Paul boom. Right? $300 cards that now go for 6,000, 5,000, 4,000, right? Like, no one wanted it then because it had no value. Now it has a lot of value. So now people look into the history and the story. So the trick is to try to do your own research, find cool, rare, scarce, find items that you think like, this should have a lot more demand. Those and are fairly cheap. Like those, and have not had the boom or had the exposure that they should. And then if you can have a story on how they're going to get that exposure, all the better. Now, that doesn't mean that it's ever going to take off, but at least it's more likely not going to implode on you. If you're buying into the huge hype, if you're buying into sort of all that movement, you're taking a huge risk. Now there are people who like momentum and understand all of this. And this is the thing I was going to add to what Dan said. There are people who understand all of that. And the reason they didn't keep buying the Charizard UPC is because as soon as it started coming down, they realized that it's probably going to keep coming down because of the psychology and the fact they realized probably a lot more was printed than they thought. That is a real, you changing sort of your mind about how much product you think was printed or these types of things is different. Like changing an actual fundamental, getting new information is different. But what isn't different is you had no idea how much was printed anyway. A certain amount was printed. It seemed like too much. Everyone started being negative. It's the exact same thing that happened in Champions Path. And I remember Champions Path being huge. And then a certain big YouTuber made a video saying Champions Path, is the worst set. It was talked about a lot. People saying how bad Champions Path was. Some of it was true. But it seemed to me like the hate for it was just like way overblown. It was like, yeah, it's a little boring because there's like not that many cards in it. You get a lot of duplicates, but it has like 3 great Charizards that everyone wants. Like, where was the hate for sets like Dragon Majesty that is now $40 a pack, where there weren't no Charizards? There's no card that anyone wants from that set. Like, yet that set is really expensive, right? Look for irrational negativity, and you can look at it for modern sets. You can look at it for vintage sets. And you can look at it in this hobby and other hobbies. That is where, if you want to speculate, I would speculate right on the downside of that. So that's the downside of demand, right? The downside, the other factor is that supply side. And there's some stuff right now that I think people are way too down on demand, but there's also so much supply that it's still probably not a good investment, or it's going to take so much demand or so long for it to come back, these types of things. So, I've talked about like rainbow rares, particularly from Sun and Moon, as an example of that. It's an example of where I'm very, very comfortable saying that people are irrationally negative on a demand side, but I'm not comfortable saying that there might be too many of those like forever for the foreseeable future. And although I think that we're going to look back and those are going to be like they're far more likely to remain at the same value than I think a lot of these alt arts are. or go up on a percentage basis, like they still might not be a good investment because there's still too much printed given the amount of demand that there'll ever be for them. So that's how you're trying to bring in that demand, that supply side, and you're taking gambles, you're speculating on these things.
Yeah.
But be on the right side of those things. And it's not, there's that people like, people have different risk appetites and risk comfort. I'm someone who's like, there is so many ways to like pretty safely, or way more safely make money than buying a product that's already gone up $300 and hoping it's going to go 300 more. Like that's just like crazy pants to me. Like if you're trying to make money, just buy a low auction, buy a number of cards, grade them, sell them higher, like learn how to flip. And then as you're kind of doing that, take some of the better pieces, hold them for yourself from some of those types of things. It's just a way smarter move than and you see these people, like it's the same person who buys this set at the highest price ever that buys it halfway up and then doubles their money and thinks they're a genius. And this is what I always say is you're always going to have these people who say, I'm a genius, I made all this money, on this thing. It's like, but you had very flawed logic for why you made the money. So you got lucky, but there was a 50-50 chance it was going to double or halve, and you happened to get it on the way up. The guy with the same attitude and thinking as you bought it from you, and he lost half his money. So anything to add to that, Dan?
I think just touching on the very dangerous thing that people do when the positive outcome happens, they attribute the decision as having been right. Like you can go to the casino and you can bet $100 on the green zero, right? And it might hit. Long term though, if you do that 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, you lose 3% or whatever the edge is on roulette. Like it's a bad decision. It's negative EV gambling. The math just works out. So like just because it hit, just because you made money doesn't mean you made the right decision. And if you keep iterating on that, you might come to find that out when it's too late or something. Yeah. Like you just need to be really, really careful.
On
that point for sure.
It seems like the most obvious thing in the world to me that it's like focus on your strategy and your logic, not on outcome, and trust your process, and that over time you'll be successful. So like, I have like outlandish lucky things like selling these world promos for 6,000, right? From like 300 or whatever. But like I had a good thesis about them and I was expecting to maybe triple my money on them. And instead I went from 300 to 6,000, right? Never would have expected that. Evolving Skies, I was expecting to only make maybe 20 to 30%. And I ended up tripling my money on that. Total luck, right?
Yeah.
It was a decent thesis that got me to buy it at 95 with the second print run, right? I don't think it was a great decision to buy that. It just happened to work out. I think the World's promos were a much better decision and were much smarter, and my process there was better. But there's only so many World's promos forever, particularly in the Pokemon hobby, which is why you have to go into other hobbies. Like there's only so much like niche, undiscovered things that you have to kind of jump around to one after another. Now the flipping game gives you a lot more opportunity because the flipping game has nothing to do really with investing. It has to do with like having skills to find good auctions, to develop a network. Like Dan getting that like $40,000, thing that he bought that he can now flip for like 80,000 after he graded. Like there's no investing skill. There is zero investing skill involved in that purchase. It is purely, okay, what are these things going for on the market? And how low do I need to buy this in order to feel safe? I don't know what grades I'm going to get, but in order to feel safe that I'm going to make some money on it, right? And he got it at a price that was comfortable enough, and he made a bunch of money on it. That had zero to do with his fundamental analysis. Dan barely knew what half those cards were. He just knew that they were worth a lot more than they were. And he knew that his margin of safety, that even if the market corrected, 20, 30%, let's say something, dramatic happens, right? It corrects on you 15, 20, 30%. Like you got it so low and there was such good upside on some of those 10s and you have, and you knew, like, and some of those hobbies are, these are pretty strong IPs that are unlikely to really collapse. This is not like you're buying tons of Kickstarters where it's like, who the hell knows? Like, that was a very good flip buy. But again, really try to understand how that has nothing to do with investing. And so if you're dipping your toe in investing, you're trying to think about, how is this price going to move over time? What are the supply and demand fundamentals underneath it? You do want to always get it at a really good price, and it can be helpful to buy it for 40-50% under market, so you have the option to flip it if you want. But that sort of investment mindset thing, like, it's, first of all, it's you're taking more risk in it. And I think it only makes sense, in my opinion, and I'll be really blunt, okay, in collectibles. I think it only makes sense when you're really targeting, like, pretty undiscovered things at this stage in the market, like things that, like, seem really strangely undervalued. Like, you look at it, it has all the supply and demand fundamentals as, like, an item that's like 10 times, 20 times the value. Like, that's what I'm doing, to be really blunt. It's not buying things that have already gone up 300 to 400 and then hoping that the Pokemon market's going to continue to grow over time and I'm going to make money. Now, I do think that that's okay. I just don't think that that's going to that is going to outperform the stock market or real estate. It's going to be way less liquid, and it's going to pay you no dividends and no yield, and it has much more of a risk of dropping 60 to 70% without a lot of the upside. So what are your thoughts on that breakdown, Dan?
Yeah, I agree largely. And one of the things that kind of scares me, and it scared me enough, how common it was too. Like, the question, when is the next boom gonna happen? I still feel like we're booming. I feel like we're in a big place right now. The market's strong. I can see it going up. I can see it doing well, going up from here. But, like, if your investment strategy is to just buy a bunch of stuff and then wait for the next perfect storm of things to go on that causes us to 10x from here, I don't think that's coming anytime soon, at least not from here. Maybe 5 years from now, maybe multiple years from now, after a slow kind of rebuilding set, like drifting down for a few years and going from there. But yeah, if your goal is to just, I'm going to buy a bunch of stuff and wait for the 10x and then sell it all and retire, I don't feel I don't feel that's a very likely scenario to happen again. It was really a perfect storm, and we 10x, we 20x, whatever the numbers were, everything was different. I mean, some things never have gone down, some things didn't pop quite as much 2020, but a lot of stuff's come down 50 to 80% from there, right? Some stuff's come down 50 to 80%, some stuff 90, some stuff 5x since 2020. I mean, it's a very, very broad, diverse market.
Yeah, and so I think it's good to understand why did the things go up that went up? And in my mind, it's a few different things. It's either things that were quite rare that had zero attention on them. Okay, that's category one. Quite rare had zero attention on them. Then there were items that just had in my view, they just had so much attention on them from all of the media and from all of the, that, like, even though they weren't rare, they've also done pretty well or held up or gone up. And that's been the stuff that's held. So trying to apply that going forward, like without some sort of like fundamental boom that sort of raises everything, like, to me, there's the one scenario that I see. Let's say there is no big event that causes some like large boom across the board in the Pokemon market ever again. Let's just say. I think where we can view, like, if you look at like what still went up over some of those periods in sports cards or over some of those periods in comic books, it was the very rare, like, middle to higher end type thing. It was the items that there were just not enough to go around, and they were the ones that all the people who stayed wanted a copy in their collection. So just something to think about, something that is a very key, historic, important item to the hobby that everyone is going to want who's left, and other items are not going to be able to compete with it for whatever reason, basically. So even though they're printing new sets, those items are not going to compete with the item that you're buying, that type of thing. So Retro saying he's been selling junk wax baseball and spending real. I spell multiple boxes per night. It's wild 9 baseball season. So like, so last time I was buying junk, so I bought some junk wax for fun, like at the height of like the Pokemon mania, and you could buy like a lot of these boxes for like $5 to $10 each, that were like $50 retail. I assume they're still going for that, Retro. Let me know if like they're higher now. I'd be amazed if they were able to get like above $15-20. Of course, it depends on what
some random junk wax did, just because it had like some certain rookie, right? Like pretty insane.
Yeah, I mean the key rookies from that era, like Griffey. Griffey's what, like 89, I want to say. I'm just guessing.
Forget. Yeah, I don't remember exactly. I don't know if anyone's watching the football game, but like I've been passively watching it in the background. Jacksonville just they were down so much all game, and then they just came back and won it at the buzzer. That was wild. My son's I'm a Jets fan. My wife's a Cowboys fan. Somehow my son, I don't know why or how, but he picked the Jaguars as his favorite team. And yeah, they just came back after being down 20 something. Nuts.
TA experiences with the constant drop in prices. What do you guys think the bottom will be? Is it too early to buy things now? So I feel like we probably touched on this. Do you want to add anything?
I think we covered it. I mean, some things never dropped. Some things kind of hit the bottom and turned back and are on the way back up, and the market's just way too broad. Overall, like I think we're past the bottom. Yeah, it's just too. I would need to go segment by segment, right? You would need to name a card, and then I'd talk about it specifically.
Yeah, my best guess would be something like the rarest, most historic items have probably been worth buying in low auction for the last year and will probably continue for the next few years. But that can also just be me being hopeful to a certain extent. I don't have evidence for that. But if that continues to go down, like all the other stuff, like I don't like, that's your best bet. So it's sort of like I would buy nothing or buy that. in my sort of opinion. And I think you can certainly make a case from a purely financial perspective of buying nothing, but listen, it takes a long time to build a collection at good value. Like buying low auctions and buying under market, like you don't just get that every day, particularly on good items. And there's some like items that may only come up once a year or twice a year. So, those would be what I'd be targeting, right? Like if there's right now there's 50 Moonbryons at any time going in a PSA 10, like that one you're going to have lots of options to get. But there might be cards that there are only 2 auctions a year, 4 auctions a year. That would be something that I would be more tempted to pull the trigger on. Dan and I can't make any promises obviously on anything, but just speaking personally, like what I feel comfortable with, as long as I really liked the item, like that would be the type of thing that I would be comfortable going after, more comfortable. And some of those have gone up quite a bit, and others have continued to fall 5, 10, 15%. It's really item to item.
And just on the second point of that question, is it too early to buy things right now? There's always something worth buying. There's always a play. One, if you're just like consumer enjoyment side of it, there's always something to buy for the experience, just for the joy, for the consumer side. But there's always something that's undervalued relative to everything else. There's like Pokemon is so broad, diverse. I think it's a safe statement to say something is always going to like 5x in any given year. There's always just going to be some niche, some random play, some random card that is going to 5x in a year, regardless of if everything is 10xing or going down 50%.
Yeah, and my goal in what I'm saying is not to push people out of the market, but it's to maybe give people or encourage patience and thinking about like being here long term and really building a collection, that you're really happy with over a long period of time. Trying not to burn yourself out, financially with FOMO. And I just think that like that's like any person who has any sort of channel, like I think that's the best thing that they can do for people and for the hobby, over the next period here. Should I sell now or hold low pop mid-area English PSA 10 hollows and reverse hollows?
Depends on what your goals are. If your goals are to have those cards, those are the cards that, like, if you've been monitoring the pops, they've gone up, surely. Some of them haven't gone up nearly as much as I would have expected. The prices are going down generally on them, but probably case by case, there's probably some that have held more or gone up slightly. But yeah, I can't answer whether you should sell or hold because I don't know what your broader goals and all that are. Me personally, if I owned them, my strategy would not be to just wholesale, like auction them off, paper hands them that way. I always go low list buy it now, and I just let the buyers come to me. I feel decent about those longer term. Again, some of them I feel better about than others, but my strategy would be just low list buy it now and let the buyer come to me.
Yeah, I feel conflicted about this era and the prices, and again, to Dan's point, which is exactly right, is that it really would depend card to card. The first thing I would do is like I would look up to see exactly what card we're talking about here, because like there's a dramatic difference between like a pop 4, pop 2, like secret rare level X between a pop 4, pop 6 regular holo that just hasn't been graded because it like never had any value and it wasn't a key Pokemon. Like, so that's different right there. Then there's a big difference between like a card that like is selling at near an all-time high, maybe of like $600 or $1,000, versus a card that's selling at 600 to 1,000 that was selling at like $2,000 before and has come down. Even though it's a popular Pokemon, it's come down because some supplies hit the market. I would be more tempted to hold that card of the two, and I would want to sell cards that I feel like the pop report is more likely to grow on those, and I'm getting most of the premium from the low pop. I tend to like selling things when I get a lot of premium for a low pop. I'm not quite like Dan, where I do see value in 10s, and I think, Dan and I definitely, we disagree with this, and I really enjoy them as a collector, but I'm also like, I'm perfectly happy if someone's willing to pay me $25,000 for a 10 when I can get the 9 for 1,000, just because it's an extremely low pop. Like, there becomes a point where like that feels good to me. That doesn't mean that I'm right from a financial sense, but I have to go also with what I think has value. And I think when someone's, particularly if the card I don't think really is a 10, or I don't think really is pristine, as a lot of those mid-gen cards are actually, having a 9 in a 10 case and then being able to sell it at a humongous premium over a card that looks just as good, it's hard to pass that up, particularly when I feel like more could be graded. When I went and on those cards, like I'm still getting top market on a lot of those cards, or near highest ever sold on those like really low pop ones. The ones that are more like 15 to 25 to 30, a little more mixed. Like some of them I'm feeling like I'm selling like pretty close to the top of the market. The other ones like aren't selling that well. And I'm having to like, constantly kind of decrease the price a little bit. I still feel like they're near where they were, at the height. I don't feel like they've dipped. I think there's quite a bit more risk in those than something like your PSA 10 more flushed out WotC cards, or your E series, or even your original Nintendo 8 and EX, or your Gold Stars. I feel like those are more of them have already been graded of, the rate, not necessarily, but the rate, I think the rate is going to stay similar in those of growth, or go down a little bit. I actually think that the rate could increase in some of these middle periods still, or at least not go down. And I like investing or speculating on vintage cards where I feel like we may get to a point in the next few years where like not where the pop reports aren't going up anymore. Because I think psychologically that's going to be massive. For that to me is the reason that these would go up a lot in value. And when we look at other hobbies, like the reason that like first appearance comics and high grades, the reason why like certain sports cards are selling for $10 million, $5 million, like either they're really low serialized, meaning that more can't come on the market, or they're very, very old and no more are really being graded for many years, despite the really high prices, which gives people confidence that, okay, if I spend millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands on this card, another one is not going to hit the market in a week. And that's the type of confidence that rich people want when they buy these items. And I think there is a decent amount of money sitting on the sideline, and I think there'll be more money 5, 10, 15 years as people have more disposable income. And there could be a point where those two things happen at once for items that have that type of thing. Those would be the items I would hold. The items I would sell would be the different type of item, and I would then put that money back in. And again, middle gen, there are items that fit both of those criteria, I would say, or one or the other, I mean.
Yeah, as always, it's card by card. You can't really paint with such a broad brush because mid-era is just very diverse. There's a lot of sets in there, a lot of different cards.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully that detail helps you like apply it though to specific cards, right? That the hope, is that our detailed enough answers, you can actually take that and apply it. But yes, we are not ones to tell you exact things. One, because we're both actively competing in these markets. And two, it's just we don't need to push prices artificially one way or another. And three, teach a man to fish, right?
One strategy I always employed, and there were times when I was in the net buying phase, 2014 to 2019, there were times that I sold a card that I had one copy of out of my collection, knowing that it's a set card in PSA 9, I can get it back. But for that relative time, it just felt a little more overvalued. And I had lofty goals. I was chasing everything in PSA 9. So I might sell this card because I bought it at half that. I can make a margin on it. And now I can buy this other collection. I can just keep the money moving. I was profiting in cards, profiting in my collection growth. So if you've got 50 of these cards, you can list them all really, really high. And maybe you're going to get a surprising sale, one a week, one a month, whatever your rates are, whatever you're looking to do. But yeah, you might just having it listed, having it out there, you might get a shocking new all-time high, just having it available, that one person that needs that one card. It doesn't hurt to have something available for sale, right? Just make sure you put a number on it you're willing to part with it for.
All right, so we're at 10:30 right now, so it's an hour and 10 minutes behind. Not bad. Angry Orchard, it's a cider.
Wait, we're an hour and 10 minutes behind, and we've been live for an hour and 17 minutes. Oh, man.
We spent the first 45 minutes just not answering questions.
Yeah.
Okay. Will the Chinese want some English too, or purely Japanese? The Chinese.
They'll want some English.
Done.
We got to go quick, right? We got to go quick now.
Yes. Okay, fine. Ready? Should we try to go real quick and catch up?
5
the good
words.
thing is that people give up and they stop asking questions, and then that lets me catch up.
Yeah, you'll be able to churn through an hour of backlog in 10 minutes.
All right. Chelsea, same question, but they start. Sure. Okay. What are your thoughts on buying black and white X and Y raw full art? So that's what I've been doing as I look extreme discrepancy and card value sealed. Yeah. I feel very confident in what you're doing just by the very fact, because I have seen that too, the discrepancy. Actually, I read this wrong. So I do think that discrepancy is meaningful, but be careful with that discrepancy, Connor, because people, I think, could one of two things. One, you just have sealed collectors who are just willing to pay huge prices for these boxes because they're hard to find. There aren't that many of them. I think particularly on the Japanese side for some of these sets. Two, I also think that could be one of the most overinflated. I think sealed in general worries me a little bit. And the mindset of people buying sealed, I think that they feel more safe. They're not really doing their due diligence. It's worked out too much. I think there's a sort of who's everyone going to sell this to eventually when it's time to sell thing, I'm afraid, with a lot of that stuff that I worry less about for a lot of graded stuff. Cause of the rare graded stuff, the stuff that when there's 30 copies, 40 copies, I just don't think that's a lot of copies of these items compared to the thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of booster boxes that are around. If a lot of people try to sell it once. What I will say is that the best thing I like to look at, right, is the price of the raw versus the price graded. And I have seen, obviously, black and white and X and Y raw full arts, difficult cards to grade. Fresh out of pack can be a lot of difficulty. You can easily get 8s, 7s. I mean, I pulled 7s, from packs before, of some of
Mhm.
these errors. Really depends on the set, really depends on the card, obviously. But on the Japanese side, I've had a little bit better luck. Uh, and you know, on the Japanese side in particular, I was able to buy quite a bit of this really cheap. This was an area that I did engage in a little bit over the last year and a half, occasionally buying some of these, and made some decent money on grading them. Or I think I'll make some decent money. Some are still in like my grading pile that I'm waiting for hopefully $12. We'll see if it, if or when it gets to that. But things that I'm buying that fit this criteria, that I'm getting, 15 cards for $120, and I only need like one of them to be a 10, and and then I look through them and I keep, 3 or 4 of them that I'm going to grade that I think will get 10s and 9s, and the rest I'll just like sell for the price that I basically bought them for, and you just keep the non-gradable ones like circulating in the community. Sometimes I worry that's going to happen to me, and I'm going to get the 10 cards that someone has already looked through.
Mhm.
But doing stuff like that I think makes sense. Trying to grade it yourself. The reverse can also make sense though. And I know Dan like talks a lot for very good reason, and a lot of people about like, graded slabs being overvalued, but like there's also plenty of instances, particularly on rarer stuff, and this is the stuff that like Dan and other people tend to not be grading and are not dabbling in. There is stuff, including in these areas, where it makes sense to buy the 10. Like the 10 is actually like the cheapest one, because it's really difficult to grade, because the raw is selling for like, there are cards that are like the raw is selling for 70. It's extremely hard to grade this card, and the 10 is like 210 or 180, and it's like the amount of money you'd have to put in, and the 9's only selling at like 70 also, or 80, and people are paying like 70, 80 for raw cards that are like going to get 8s and 7s and are going to sell for like 50. Like you see those things happening. Don't just understand, and Dan knows this extremely well, but like, something can be lost in the messaging of like, just put stuff into plastic and make money. Dan doesn't actually mean that. People are saying that are very in the know and they're joking, but like that is very true. But then there are items that like the opposite's true, right? And that it's actually
Mm.
the PSA 10 that has the most value because it's really rare, it's really hard to get. And Dan might just, and a number of people might just be like, it's just a pass for me because I don't collect or speculate on on PSA 10s because I think they're overvalued and don't believe in them anyway, which is like a very valid point. But if you were to speculate in something like that, it makes sense to just buy the 10, like in that instance. And I buy graded cards, like and particularly back in the day, I bought lots of graded cards. I graded a lot myself, but I also bought a lot of graded cards, and so don't shy away from that when you think there's a really good deal on something that's really hard to grade.
Yeah, buying those cards raw, I don't know where you're talking, but you're looking at eBay, TCG Player, you're going to be getting a lot of 7s and 8s because coming out of the pack, a lot of those were 8s. And like those theoretical numbers you threw out, like 210 for the 10, 70 for the raw, 70 for the 9. A lot of times I like the 9 the best out of those still. Like I just, it depends on your goals. It depends on, are you trying to build a whole set? What's your capital? If you can't afford all the 10s, the 9s are a good option. If you're getting them for the same as raw near mint, you're buying mint graded already. And then it comes down to buy the card, not the grade, right? Like, are the 10s actual 10s, or are they just 9s that had a good day? A lot of considerations there, but you covered a lot of it really well. So
yeah, and that's like super subjective, right? So like, how much more should I pay for the 10? And like everyone's going to have a different answer on a collector basis. From an investor speculator market perspective, the more I think Dan would definitely agree with this, the more money you are relying on the plastic adding versus the actual card adding, the more risky it is. But it can also be risky in your favor on the upside if people like grading even more for some reason in the future. But I think that we're still at a point where I would lean the other way, and where. And again, as I said earlier, like there are very low pop 10s that I am selling because I'm getting a huge premium. But again, in the X and Y era, if there's a really low PSA 10 pop and I'm only paying twice as much for it versus like an alt art where like 83, 90% of that card is being graded a 10 and I'm still paying double, like it's clearly a better deal in the black and white XY. Now that doesn't mean that it's a good. That doesn't mean that
Yeah.
it makes sense. And Dan could still very logically feel the same way and just feel like, well, it's less crazy here, but it's still bad. And it's
Yeah, you always need to be careful making that comparison. And
but,
going back to a point you made earlier, like
Yeah.
looking at the seal, trying to figure out how much it would cost to pull it, you always need to be really careful with that. Not as bad with the black and white XY era. XY era was printed quite heavily. These are English set cards, hundreds of thousands of copies of every chase card, very likely. So you can't just look at how much would it cost to pull it, because a lot of them have already been opened. A lot of them are already out there raw that have been pulled before. So worse with like WotC. You can't say, well, a box is this, it would cost this much to pull it. The 10 rate is this. A lot of things have already been pulled. I mean, millions of base set Charizards have already been pulled, right?
Yeah, and I think the Japanese market is a lot less fleshed out than the English. That's my personal opinion on the black and white and XY. Although there have been a number of people trying to change that and buying a bunch of those and grading a bunch of those, and we've seen prices on some of those slabs, like cards that were $20-$30 now $60-$70. Like a full art Darkrai or something from a 2015 X and Y set, used to be in a PSA 9 $30 and now is selling for 70. I mean, we've seen both the prices go up, but also people grading more of them and getting more of that mint supply out. So some positives and negatives if you're looking to kind of flip and speculate there. Pokeball says, question, do you ever look at other outlets to sell cards? For example, Instagram/Twitter/Facebook, as opposed to eBay or other sellers' platforms? Is it worth it for specific cards to avoid fees, etc.?
I personally, I've voiced my take on this many times. I think eBay is well worth the fee they charge. I think a lot of people, to their own detriment, are just fee averse. They fear fees, they fear taxes, and then they handicap their businesses or their side hustles, whatever they're doing, because they try to skirt the rules, right? They try to skirt the fees. They try to friends and family, Venmo, this, that. That's getting into taxes too, which is just a fee essentially. So yeah, I do sell some off eBay here and there through my socials, through my YouTube channel. Someone finds it. But at the end of the day, I do 95+% of my business through channels like eBay, because the buyer pool is just massive. I have 3,000 Instagram followers maybe, and eBay has how many tens of millions of buyers that are just on there all the time searching. And most cards. So I was just going to wrap up with most cards, eBay's fee is 12%. Most cards you can sell quicker for that extra 12% over selling it privately.
Yeah, if you were trying to maximize gains in a business where you were consistently selling, you can just sit down and do the math and see how irrational trying to save pinch pennies here, but then you're giving so much more time and so much more effort, where eBay, you can just post all of these things and it's such a great platform where so many people can see it. You don't have to, you're going to be able to sell so much more. Your cards are going to be advertised so much more to people across the world than they could be on your, Instagram. And obviously the bigger influencer you are, the bigger person you are, the more of a network you might have directly through your socials. And there might be, more ways to do that. Now, for people who are not selling that much, who are just selling maybe a few times a year and are selling a few big items a year, I don't see why you wouldn't want to try to avoid the fees by selling directly through Instagram, by selling to friends, people that you trust, who are willing to pay. And it's not a tax avoidance thing. It's just a fee, eBay fee avoiding thing. But other than that situation, if you were a business and you were doing this all the time, I don't know why. eBay is going to charge what they're going to charge. It's worth it at that price. So, I mean, I wish the fees were less, but good on, it's capitalism, right? They can charge those fees because their service is good enough, and I'm going to keep using it and keep paying those fees. Mm-hmm. Now I also, am fine being irrational, because I'm not a business at times. And sometimes I just don't like giving companies and things extra fees, but I'm very aware of like the irrationality of that. And if I was very serious about maximizing this as a business, and again, I sell on eBay. I sell through people like Dan and other people who sell through eBay and pay those fees too. So it's not something that I, am like avoid at all costs.
And one of my big goals, and it's probably unobtainable, potentially even for me, but it's unattainable for 99% of people probably selling on eBay. I really want to make myself so valuable to eBay. I want to sell so much through them. I hope to achieve like contracted rates eventually. That's like a short to medium term goal as a business, because that would just be a massive boon for the business when the 12% fees become 6%, 5%. I don't know what number they could theoretically be, but there are people in the space that have achieved that.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a good relationship to build. If you're serious about building a business, you should start your relationship with eBay and with auction houses and with the grading card companies. You should contact, like people at the grading card companies. I've like befriended some people there. I have contacts there, people I talk to, like they give deals to people. Like it's if you're going to do something a lot in this space, it's very worth like reaching out and and networking and developing relationships. Because I am not someone who is constantly buying or selling, excuse me, I am constantly buying. And I use a lot of other people to sell for me. I'm someone who I'm not putting effort into developing those selling relationships. All my effort is going into decreasing my fees everywhere I can in terms of the buying and the grading in particular. Retrograde says, when are the Wish Charmander hoodies coming, and can you make his Asmar cross ad?
That's with respect to my new branding, my new logo. I'm probably gonna make some of my own shirts for Orlando. I'm gonna make like a nice tablecloth thing, like a little banner that'll hang down in front of my table. But I don't know that I'll sell anything. Yeah, the Wish branded Charmander. I'm not sure how long he'll stick around. I like just the idea of the logo that I'm using for like my avatar. Just something more simplified, not copyright infringing.
When you weigh the pros and cons of holding a specific sealed product, do you value fun to open or hard to pull chase cards higher? Instinctually, did you lean one way or the other? Because like the answer is going to be a fence it, like always for both of us, because both are probably important. We don't really.
It's know. A combination. Yeah, it's absolutely. Which one? I think fun to open, but obviously hard to pull chase card is like a subset that's built into being fun to open, right? So they're not two distinct things. They're kind of. I think fun to open is the primary for me. Fun to open is more important. One component of that will be like, is there that underlying gambling, like 1 in 1,000 chance I can pull this crazy alt art? So they go in tandem, but fun to open being more important for me.
Okay, I think you answered that fully. I would have said basically the same thing. Yeah. How far back in sets do you think will Pokemon go for the next reprints?
2 years. 2 years historically is where my mind has always been. Evolutions kind of is the exception that proves the rule. What was that, 4 or 5 years? But historically speaking, it's been about 2 years. So what would that land on? That would be I'm just going to Google it so I don't guess wrong. February 2021 was Shining Fates. Hopefully we don't get any more of that. We don't need any more of that. But yeah, I guess, or no, not 2021. Yeah. Wait, where are we? Where's Sword Shield? They changed the layout of this Bulbapedia. Okay, here it is. Battle Styles. Battle Styles, Chilling Reign, Evolving Skies, Fusion Strike, Brilliant Stars, Astral Radiance, Lost Origin, and Silver Tempest. All in play, in my opinion.
I don't have any thoughts or any knowledge on this.
I'd be shocked if they went pre Sword and Shield. I'd be
Yeah.
shocked if they went Cosmic Eclipse, things like that. But I think most of Sword and Shield is in play.
Yeah, these are the types of things I defer more to people like Mason and Danny. And even them, it's sort of like, most of it's just going to be like they've heard from a distributor that like they're getting something, as far as like even people who like deal in this all the time. I think, it's like, how do you really predict, what Pokemon is going to do here? I don't know. It just feels so random and yeah.
We need an inside man at one of these printing facilities. Like, people know there are at least hundreds of people that work in that facility that every day go to work and they see what's going across the printers. Someone's got to be listening, watching. We need an in. We need to know what's being printed.
What do y'all think about Rainbow's long term? Seem like they're getting discontinued in SV.
I've mentioned it before. I'm not a huge fan. I never have been. I'm not like making any specs or plays on them.
What else were you not a huge fan of? World's promos.
The stamped ones. I see. That's the thing, though. I'm not a huge fan of those, but I get it. I get it.
Dan didn't like any of these, and he still bought tons of them.
They came in as throw-ins with my Pikachus. They were like,
you were
back down for free
for years. As I was going after these, you were going after them on what's it called?
Facebook groups.
You were going.
I was buying them when they were there. I was buying them. I was mainly after the Pikachus.
This guy. This guy will say negative things, and he'll be buying. No. I think I'm
definitely not buying rainbows.
I think I think the Sun and Moon ones are, if you look at the pull rates and you look at the prices of those booster boxes, they are the cheapest. Like those and a few black and white and X and Y like full art cards, but those not even as much. Like particularly X and Y, like they are the cheapest. They're the most undervalued card per difficulty to pull rate versus price of box. Specific, some of them, like your more expensive ones are not. Like some of them are your Burning Shadows Charizard obviously is not. But ones that are $25, $30, $40, again, difficulty to pull rate versus price of box. Does that matter? I don't know. Like it makes them somewhat safe. It makes it so that if demand ever really increased on them, and if people had nostalgia for them and went back and wanted them, they would do better than basically anything in that type of category from that era, or from even the eras around it, in my opinion. Now, the struggle is the amount of those that are out there, the amount of those that are in binders. I don't have evidence for this, but I just really feel like Sun and Moon had a lot less printing than the Sword and Shield era. So the Sun and Moon stuff, I feel like there could be like a decent, again, it's like, would it shock me if those $25 ones go to $50 to $100? But it's very similar to like my feeling on a lot of things. And then those things at times went to like 300 or 500. And I was like, holy crap, that's ridiculous. Like, is it possible you could have that outsized crazy return on something like that? Yes. Is it likely? No. I would have realistic expectations. As far as the Sword and Shield ones, they are cheaper, but not much cheaper. And that should really tell you something, because the ones in Sword and Shield, nobody likes those. They were way more massively printed, and they're like the third most popular hit from all of those boxes. Whereas in Sun and Moon, they were the most popular hit, at least at the time. Now the full arts, back then the full arts were not very, Lily had some value from like Ultra Prism, and like there are a couple that like had some value, but it wasn't a thing. It was really the Rainbow Rares. And they weren't worth that much. Nothing was really worth that much back then, to be fair. So basically what I would say is that the Sun and Moon ones are better than the Sword and Shield ones versus the price. But even the Sword and Shield ones, like when you can buy some of these for like $2 a piece, $1, $2, $3 a piece, it is cheap compared to the boxes, but it's just not probably, I don't know. There's a lot of places where I'd probably put my money that like wouldn't be that. But I don't look at that and think like, oh my God, like how are they going for $1? Like $2? That's so overpriced. I'm not having like that type of reaction. I think if they were going for 30, I'd be having that reaction. I'm having that reaction to alt arts, but I seem to be alone on an island, with that sort of reaction. Because for me, so much of it, I just really think that people way overvalue their opinions and in terms of lasting power of demand. And I think so much of people's opinions about what they like has to do with what everyone's saying. Way more than people like to admit. And I just think that all of these cards have merits and have cool things, and all of them have things that make them like not as collectible as other things. And all the things that people were saying about Rainbow Rares, how much they loved them, how much they loved the difficult pull rate, how much they loved how you could put them all in your binder and like they'd all look similar and it would kind of like fade and have this like beautiful color. Now everyone says you can't tell the difference. Well, it's like people are just stupid haters.
I could buy, I don't know how many Rainbow Rares there are. I could buy 300 of one Rainbow Rare. And if I held it at arm's length, you would think I had a master set of Rainbow Rares.
Again, some of the most expensive cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Ghost Rares. Some of the most expensive comic books all have the exact same comic style. And if you put them all on the wall, you wouldn't be able to tell the differences because they all have the same drawings with the same characters. It's just people seeing price points and then it feeds on itself and then narratives feed on themselves over and over again. It's
just to go back to our last point, Evolving Skies has tripled. It's hot. Everyone wants it. It's high. Alt arts, they're high. They're doing well. Everyone wants them. Rainbow Rares are like the Charizard UPC, right? It's low. It's gone down. No one wants it. It's garbage.
I mean, yeah. Level X's, dude, I cannot tell you how many people told me that Level X's were the ugliest freaking cards in the world. People told me Primes were the worst things, were useless. No one ever want these things. People told me Top Soon. People told me Cardass 1997. No one would like that. People only like the TCG. People only like collecting the TCG cards. People have no freaking idea what they're talking about when they are trying to predict, but again, I am not trying to predict future demand. This is where people don't understand. I am not predicting that sometime in the future, everyone is going to say that these cards are beautiful and love them again. I think there's a good chance they won't.
Just buying value. Yeah.
But at the price point, you're buying them so low that if they do, there's really good upside there. And I do think that so far, and this is dangerous, like every era is like there aren't enough eras yet, at least with the amount of demand in the hobby, that like the key chase card doesn't find some traction at some point again in the future. And I think that they're not old enough. I think with some time there could be some excitement. I think that the fact they all look the same will make them very collectible. I think people will love when they have any sort of rarity to them. It's the fact that they have no rarity to them, and the alt arts have this rarity because people are opening all these packs all the time. People aren't opening Sun and Moon packs, so they're not experiencing the rarity. Like those cards you pull those cards like 1 out of 2 boxes basically, but there could be 13 of them, and so they're not as hard as some of the alt arts in like the hardest set, particularly like the VMAX, but like they're pretty freaking close. When you think of how many alt art VMAXs are in that slot versus the Rainbow Rares to pull any like individual Rainbow Rare card, blah, 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 blah. But again, I'm not like, I think they're fine. I think they could have decent upside, but it's one of those things that like, if you're making small plays and you like them, I think it makes sense. Just be prepared for it to not work out, for it to take a long time. And then maybe for it to be like a huge success, like a lot of these types of things with these fundamentals have been successful in the past. So yeah, part of, I really do believe being a good investor, being real stubborn with not letting people's demand opinion, like value assessment opinions impact you one way or the other. Look for patterns, and like what people are telling you they like has a lot more to do with the moment and with the current price and with the narrative that's going on in the hobby. What's better is to look at history and to look at other hobbies to see like what made things popular. That is way better than listening to someone's opinion about what they like. Now, that's not better if you are a flipper, because flippers require liquidity and need to constantly move items. They can't just like sit on items and hope that one day someone's going to be interested in them. So if I was a flipper, I would be doing a lot more in alt arts, and I'd be trying to just get them at like low values and then flipping them immediately into the market, basically.
Mhm.
So, you know, it'd be a totally different tact with a totally different mindset. You know, the bet. And now that I've seen, I'll be completely blunt with people. Now that I've seen the impact of Deep Pocket Monsters videos and of like some of these videos out there, I see why people like just stock up on this product and then wait for that video, wait for those types of things, and then would sell into that. Like that will probably keep working for a bit. And like we used to see that with Twice Baked Jake. He used to get like 300,000 views on like his biggest videos, right? 120,000. Pat is getting 4 million. Okay. Like, talk about momentum investing, like buying, you know, like whatever's good, like the hot thing, and then hoping that he's going to show or talk about like, and again, Pat is not doing anything. He's not like telling people to buy. He's not doing any market stuff, just to make things like extremely clear. He's literally just having a channel where he's showing stuff. Okay. But you know, it has a huge, just like the electronic channels who come on and they review products and they talk about products, they talk about what product is good, what product, these things have massive impacts on the market. And if you want to play the social media game, like those dumb money guys who made all that money and then lost all that money, basically they were social arb investors, which is exactly that. They have no idea what's valuable. They don't even care. They don't care what the items are. They just follow the clicks and the traffic. You know, they lost a ton of money because they actually started to confuse social arb, in my opinion, social arb investing with value investing. And they thought that they were holding Peloton, even though like whatever, like they were holding items that had gone up 76%, thinking it would then go up 1,000. Like, you know, they held Tesla. You know, it's the same. It's why I say this all the time, that like if you can genuinely be a really, like if you can be a momentum investor and you can be someone who's on the right side of those and then sells into that hype and rides that momentum wave over and over and over again, good on you. But do not be the guy who thinks that the thing is actually really valuable and then holds it for the collapse or buys 3 times the amount. Like there are a lot of people who bought Tesla really early, then rode it to the top, thought they were a genius,
down
way more. And now they've lost wit. And, you know, and it's like, these types of stories are endless. So
there's so many studies out there, like getting into traditional investing spaces. There's so many studies out there. Very few people beat the market. Fees, even though the fees in those markets are fractions of what they are in this very high fee, illiquid, non-fungible space we're in, the fees still eat alive the active traders and long-term. Yeah, you know, like long-term, the very few people match the indexes because they're just frequently trading, paying taxes, paying fees. The
100%.
winners are like the Robin Hoods, the Schwabs, the Vanguards.
Yeah, unless you have some sort of big arbitrage element, which is like what a lot of what flippers have in Pokemon, where even though like Dan is paying a massive amount of money in PSA fees and eBay fees, like he's paying a massive amount of money off the top to all these companies, but his margins are so good that there's still that meat there, there's still that profit there. But Dan is very aware of all those fees, and so he's careful about his purchases to know that he has that type of, you know, but it, you know, it does put a lot of risk, you know, and it requires quite a bit of liquidity, and it requires an ability to arbitrage and continuously arbitrage. And I mean, there are people who made tons of money arbitraging in crypto. There are people who have made a lot of money, you know, day trading in stocks. I think a lot of that is nonsense. A lot of that is just like chart, like people who, again, it's these chart people who look at prices, but they don't actually know what the stock is, or they don't think of these things as having value. They just look at like the trends, and and it's very, listen, in a world where a lot of this stuff is run on computers, I understand how like there could just be like more patterns because like literally computers are just making the sales based on like what's going on. But like, yeah, I don't know. The whole thing is just very
the technical analysis stuff, charting, that
and to be honest, I shouldn't wade in there because I'm not an expert enough to really, you know, crap on all of it. But the psychology of it, I think, is very dubious. And the mindset and conversations I've had with some people who do it, very dubious in terms of their thought process around it.
Mm.
Again, I'm such a like I love investing. I'm a passionate value investor. I find investing in things fun. I find the game of trying to find stuff that people are missing, that people are undervaluing, like very enjoyable. Both companies, I love trying to find companies that are interesting that feel undervalued. I find a lot of pleasure in that, and I think that there's a reason why Warren Buffett, where there's a new ARK Invest, why there's a new Cathie Wood every 4 to 5 years, and why Warren Buffett's the same person over and over. They're always comparing, oh, is this person better than Warren Buffett? That's been happening every 5 years for like 40 years, but it's always Warren, it's always the value investor. It's always the great value investor versus like the, momentum sort of like, futurist who understands macroeconomic like things so much better that they can, and again, I do think Warren Buffett underestimates macroeconomic stuff, or not, that's the wrong word. He like someone like Ray Dalio, who's going to put more macroeconomic emphasis with his value investing. I think Warren is more of like, at least publicly, he's very much a guy who's like, and if we want to apply this to the Pokemon market to make this useful for people, he'd be someone who's like very much the way that I'm talking, demands we can't predict. Don't waste time on things you can't predict. It's a complete waste of time. Just sit down with the information you do have, make the best decision you possibly can, and don't go into this sort of like fantasy of like you have some sort of taste that you know what's going to be popular, like these types of things. He'd be very on that side. I think you can do a little bit more macroeconomic, thinking about sort of where, what the future holds, what likely could be popular in the future, what things have been popular in the past, what are the trends, and then where the demographics going, what type of Pokemon are the most popular, which ones will likely be popular in the future, et cetera, et cetera. But I think you can, there's only a limit to that. And I think you have to be careful trusting that too much. And just like Dan says, people just like there's a lot of ego. People like make these right calls. They don't realize that like people are making tons of money around them all the time, and I think they think that they're the only, like they made like $300 on something, and now they're like like a savant, and they like can predict somehow like what other people are gonna like or something in the future. It's dangerous thinking.
Yeah.
Okay. Professor Oak says, question: what's the most fun part of the hobby for each of you both? Is it the people, the cards, or the money? The money. No.
They're all great, right? The people, the experiences, the shared passion, the all the mushy gushy stuff, right? That's truly like the most fulfilling part of it. And then just the freedom, like me doing this as my job, me leaving my job to do this, be my own boss, like that whole angle of it is just amazing. But the cards are awesome. The cards bring me back, the nostalgia, all that stuff. And then, I mean, the money, you need money I need money to pay my bills and meet my investing goals, saving goals and all that. So, but the people above all else, you actually rank them in order for me. But they're all, the money obviously last, but still very, very important.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I'd rank these. I think at times the cards are the most important to me. At times the people are the most important to me. There are times when like I definitely am getting the most joy of just being a private collector, and like I can even find people frustrating, like and a negative to my collecting experience. But like also like my friends in the hobby and like people I've met through like our Discord and our Patreon and like just in general, like I've had a lot of great relationships, a lot of great conversations. I'm working on building like more local events to meet more people locally. Like I've also had a lot of positives with people, and it adds a lot to the hobby. The money for me is just a other than the intellectual game and the ego game of money, which is fun, which is like obviously a big part of this channel, is just like the intellectual fun of talking about money and finance and markets. That's very enjoyable. The actual like having dollar bills part is only so that I can buy more cards and like go visit Collecticon and see people. So like for me, having a stack of money is not interesting at all. Like money is only a means to the other parts. Now I have, because I changed careers this year, which some of you may know, I have had to rely more this year than any other year on the money from the hobby to like pay expenses and to pay different sorts of things. So I've had more of like the money needs to be more important. But again, it's not to just like have cash at the end of the day. It's to like, go to a wedding and like pay bills and like, do other types of things. So, but my goal is to like not rely on the money at all, and the money just to be so I can like buy more cards and build like the long-term collection. So that's definitely like where I'd put the money. When do we move to investing in code cards? Hey, well, Nick did a great presentation on investing in code cards.
Every code card is a one of one. That's all I'm gonna say. Yeah, I already said it.
Classic. Dan's gonna start. If you join his membership on his YouTube channel, Dan will start to sign a one of one code card and send it to you.
I'll give you a one of one signed one of one code card. Yeah, every month. Oh god.
This isn't a question. Sealed products feels like stock trading with high P ratios. EV box. Why do people buy boxes? Because it isn't worth opening. Seems to be based on my. Yeah, I mean, I think like I think that a lot of people who are opening this like product are getting value from it because they have a different mindset than someone like me. Like, I think they're newer to the hobby. They have more of an optimistic view on like how valuable these cards are going to be. I think that they feel like they're going to make money, or there's a realistic or reasonable chance of making money off of it. And it's like really fun to gamble and open. I don't think a lot of people are sitting there thinking, I'm definitely going to lose, or I'm likely to lose. And that's why it's like justifying some of the price points. And then other people, I think it's just, they enjoy being part of the community. The opening culture, something that like James Z and G Emporium has talked about for a long time, just kind of like how strange it seems to pay so much money to have someone open such an expensive pack for you. If we talk about, vintage packs or something like that, on these channels, I think that you're opening it with a community, or you're opening it with a famous streamer, a famous person online and it's exciting to see that famous person call your name and talk about you. You're getting an experience. Like, I have no issue with any of that. I do think it's probably fraught for addiction issues and fraught for predatory, casino gambling, tactics from the, doing tons of duck rate, whatever they do, all the things that they can add and the lights. But go into a casino, they have no windows. You have no idea what time it is. They force feed you drinks. Like, I mean, it's like, pick your poison here. Is this really that much worse? And everyone's going to go on a different place about whose fault it is, and for me, it's like, it's everyone's fault. It's your fault if you're using predatory, whatever, and you're mistreating your customers, and you want bad things to happen to them, and you're happy that it, to take advantage of them. And, a person who's struggling with addiction, like, they need to take control of themselves and their own life. And so that's what I'd say about all that. Anything you want to touch on any of that, Ramble?
Gambling's a huge industry. And then, I mean, the boxes, the older they get, they do get more scarce over time. They are a collectible in and of themselves. I mean, a lot of people just like to have, maybe I'll open it someday, maybe I won't. It's just a cool, scarce item. Yeah, you covered a lot of it.
Leaf Green Goblins. Hey guys, how do you define a healthy market? Is it simple as long as there are buyers, Pokemon is doing well? How do uneducated buyers play into it? Thanks. What are your thoughts on what a healthy market means to you? It means big, lots of dollars in Dan's pockets, whatever.
2020 was not healthy. 2020, I think as long as everyone's having generally a good time, and as long as everyone has generally reasonable expectations and just open honesty, like, people know what they're getting when they're buying it. And I feel we're a lot closer to there today than we were in 2020. 2020 was like the epitome of just a lot of unhealthiness. The content, the people just gambling, investing in these at these astronomical prices that didn't make any sense. And I mean, hindsight's 2020, but 2020, it felt like it was going to end badly, and it did for a lot of people that just, and overall, like what percent of the people interacting really got burnt that bad? And probably overall, probably a very low portion. I mean, it probably, I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to say. Yeah.
I think it was pretty bad, like for a lot of people. But again, yes, I mean, losing 1,000 versus losing 50,000. I think more people were in the lost 500 to 1,000 in value, camp. And like,
hopefully they learned. As long as
Yeah.
they learned from it, it was a valuable, worthwhile lesson.
yeah. Yeah, I think you got a great answer. I think that was articulated well. I don't really have anything to add. I mean, how do uneducated buyers play into it? Yeah, I think Dan answered it really well. Just sort of like, it's sort of just a general feeling, right? That like people have agency, people are making free choices, but that people are like educated and like you feel confident that like people know what they're doing, they're in control of themselves. And you feel like people who are working hard are getting rewarded for that. You feel like people who add value are getting rewarded for that. People aren't scamming, taking advantage, like all those types of things. And all of that stuff naturally happens when prices get steadier. Like the more prices go crazy and the higher they are, the more scams. Like all this stuff is very related. A lot of the nastiness and negativity comes, and a lot of like the drama videos now that have come and like the calling out, all that stuff is now a response to all of that, all the fact that so many people were scamming and doing that sort of stuff. So it's a sort of but yeah, it's all gonna balance itself out.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, like I just like take, I enjoy, some of the negativity, some of the drama. It's kind of interesting to hear strong opinions and fun. And then there are times when it's just like it gets too much or it's annoying, and then I just turn it off. Like that's how I cope or deal with that type of stuff in the marketplace. Should I invest in water mallards? Yes, that's coming back for sure. Is the next craze the border having the card art and the rest of the card blank? Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of places they could go still on these little pieces of cardboard. A lot of creativity left, I'm sure.
I will say, like Rev's channel and like, I mean, he's definitely seeing by far the biggest growth, but like, channels continuing to grow, these videos getting lots of views. That shows like Pokemon there's still a lot of interest, and it's great that these channels are still getting a ton of engagement. These channels are by far, I mean, when you like, yes, the people who watch us are like super deep in and are like on average, like certainly buying more than people who watch those channels and are like more engaged. But like the amount of people, like 4 million people watching one of those videos who hear about Pokemon and hear about these sets, like it's just massive exposure for the hobby.
Yeah, PokeRev had like 82 or 83 million views in December.
Massive.
Absolutely. Like that's big. That's big YouTube numbers. That's not big PokeTube numbers. That's like in all of YouTube. That's up there. Crazy.
And it's really good. Talk about health, like there's negatives to that, obviously, and things are gonna like, like whatever he shows is gonna get like, and like whatever. But like, there could be like addiction. Like there's always gonna be some, but like overall, it's like massively positive. If you want people to like be in the Pokemon hobby and hear about the Pokemon hobby, like the good that those channels are doing in terms of growing the hobby is like massive. It's undeniable. Any personal PSA returns lately are mostly just for business. All of my returns are first of all my personal stuff is my business stuff. I don't really have a business, right? But like, so all my returns are personal, but then I like will tend to sell. I almost always sell enough to at least fund the purchase, if not, or at least fund the grading cost, if not more. And that all has to do with obviously the prices. And do I think that when I look at the prices for things, do I think they're low or high? And do I think that now makes sense to sell that or not? And I kind of make those assessments, but it's never like, with rare exception, there are times like I'm sending out a complete set of something that I completed, and I'm going to have it all like, it's 75 serialized cards that are like all in order. And that's like, I'm going to keep that together as just like a personal collection piece from another hobby. But like, that's a rarity for me. Generally I'm sending out cards I might be missing from sets but I'm willing sometimes to sell those, and with the idea that I'll be able to buy it back cheaper later, or just de-risking a little bit, because for me it's like I never want to have too much money, and I never want to have too much money on credit cards or get uncomfortable, and I put myself in pressure situations where it's like I have a large credit card bills or these types of things, and feeling a little bit pressure to sell. I really try to avoid that as much as possible, by like preemptively, every time have a fairly big expenditure, quickly kind of selling stuff and offsetting it so it doesn't build up. But for Dan,
it's inventory, everything that's coming back from PSA, except for like mainly the only things that are going to reach my PC these days, and most of the only things in them, very, very specific items that I pulled myself, have some kind of a story to them or something of that nature. I might only add a couple cards a year to my PC moving ahead.
Let's see. Oh, I might have just lost the spot.
Uh-oh.
I think I did. Let's see. Okay. All right, let's just go here. Oh my, there's so many questions.
Pick some random spot.
Oh my God, there's so many questions. Okay. All right, here we go. We'll start here. Oh no, there's still so many questions above it that we didn't get to. All right. Do people want things because they're rare or cool, though? Their appeal isn't increased for me because it's rare. I'm one person, though, and not everyone is the same.
Almost like that prior question, like I think rarity feeds into the coolness factor for a lot of people. So it's not like they're two distinct questions. I think most people want something because it's cool. Rarity would be a function of that. For some people, it's a way bigger function. For others, not as much. That's my general take on that.
Yep, same take. Okay, let's try to catch up on chat here. I'm gonna push through a bunch here.
It's way easier to catch up when you just take like every 20th question.
All right, yeah, I'm just gonna roll down. Let's see what we're at. Will Hidden Fates ever recover? I'm starting to think it won't.
Does that mean sealed or does that mean graded?
Yeah, I mean, graded right now is sitting at like, it's one of the only cards that are like pretty much like where it's at. Like it's even below. There's quite a bit of it that's below before the boom really took place, particularly the Logan Paul part, which shows you the impact of like having lots of supply.
I thought I had some handy that just came back, but yeah, I probably was more bullish on Hidden Fates than will end up being true in reality. I've definitely stated before on different live streams that I think that one will stand out more 10 years down the line than a lot of others around it. I still believe in that, but maybe I like overestimated what that would be. Not like I took a major position in it or anything. I think I have 20 to 30 ETBs left, and I think I have a few dozen tins. Like I didn't I didn't go out because at the time that I was saying that, it was already fairly expensive. I didn't like go into the market and acquire a bunch more thinking it was a great investment, majorly undervalued. But yeah, it's hard to say. Again, I don't know if you're talking sealed. I think the sealed will just generally be drifting sideways / slightly up in the coming years. Nothing too crazy. The graded, the pops can probably go a lot higher than they already have. They've already gone really high. I'm more bullish on the sealed relative to the graded personally, as I am with most things.
Yeah, so I feel like, so I feel similarly to the Rainbow Rares about Hidden Fates, but slightly different reasons. So I think that it's going to stand, I think it's more likely to be more important and stand the test of time, like quite a bit more likely, but there's a lot more supply. So I kind of feel somewhat similarly about them in terms of price point, and they're about the same price. Like, you know, when we talk about like the Rainbow Rares versus those like, shining full arts, right? I think if you're very bullish on Pokemon, and you're somehow bullish about, if you're bullish about the Sword and Shield era, I don't know how you couldn't be bullish about those. Like, I think, to be completely honest with you, I think you have an issue in logic if you're very bullish about the sword. Like, if you just think the Sword and Shield era is better, I think you would have, if you were around in Hidden Fates, you were probably the guy online, if we went back, who wrote comments like, this is the best set ever for Hidden Fates, and this is the best set ever for, and like every time there's a new great set, I think that just be careful. That, that's what I would say. But I'm with Dan in the sense that, with all of these good sets and continue to be good sets, like, will Hidden Fates even matter? Like, will that stand out? Will that matter so much? I imagine they'll do shiny alt arts, right? I mean, that's what's next, right? Like, some sort of shiny version of that. Like, maybe that will bring attention back to Hidden Fates, though, because people will want the first shining full art with the, like, who knows, right? Like, it's like you can think about all this stuff. Again, I think it's fine probably to speculate a little on them, like buy them low, see what happens. But it's not something. It's not something that it's like, the way I felt about like, some niche Japanese stuff or like World's Promos, or I was like, this stuff's going, like, there's 10 of these, there's 250 of these ever printed. They're going for $150, and they're like a prime historic, like, cool piece within the hobby. And you have like stuff that's hundreds and hundreds of thousands to 1 million printed that already 500 times the amount. It's great. Like you just, this is not that, like, there's nothing that has those type of fundamentals that are in any sort of like Sun and Moon set. But it doesn't mean that there isn't some potential. Okay.
And just wait until we get the set, whatever they're going to call it, with the shiny alt vault. I mean, we got the shiny vault in Hidden Fates. People got kind of sick of it or overdone with Shining Fates, apparently. But wait till we get the shiny alt vault. 80 shining alt arts for the first time. Then it's like Hidden Fates, what? I mean...
Nesto's saying, so basically it could go up or it could go down in the chat. It's like, yes, but we're saying some pretty nuanced, sophisticated things. Okay. I'm trying to skip as many things. We're almost there now. Guys, if you want to start asking questions again.
As long as you skip enough, we'll make it to the bottom. I'm positive.
Yeah.
I'm bullish on that.
We've made good progress now. I'm at 225 already.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, and I'm just skipping like ones that I feel like we've answered or like aren't, or like, you know, obviously where do you find space to start your Pokemon stuff? Do you all have big spaces or have you dedicated room, Dan? I know Dan's there.
I have a warehouse in Kentucky that holds a lot of it. Troll and Toad Evo, shout out.
Yeah.
PWCC Vault. I've got a vault in Oregon that holds hundreds of cards. PSA at most times has several hundred cards of mine just in the queue.
I have some stuff in the PWCC vault. I have some stuff at 2 different parents' houses. I have stuff in my house. I have stuff a little bit at a friend's house. It's kind of all over the place a little. I do have a collection room here where most of it, the stuff that I actually like do keep with me, is in this room and not in other rooms in this house. Yeah.
And graded cards are fairly small. You can fit tens of thousands of graded cards in quite a small room. If you're talking about like modern sealed investing and getting those collection box cases, and then you can get really, really cumbersome.
The most successful individuals in the hobby kill the collector and see everything with a price tag.
I saw this come up. I've been trying to watch the live chat most of the time, just keeping up with what people are talking about and engaging a little bit. I read this one a couple times and I didn't fully get what he was saying.
I feel like this is really smart, but I'm not quite understanding.
Yeah.
Okay, the most successful individuals, because what I thought it was going to say is that that the collectors do really well, but it makes it sound like it's actually.
It almost sounds like the successful individuals in the hobby remove a lot of capital from it, almost like in a negative sense. Yeah. I'm not positive though. I read it a couple times and I had like a couple ways I was seeing it.
Yeah, so I think 2 things are said often. One thing that's said often, which I thought this was going to say, is like the whole argument that like collectors do the best because they hold things long term, because the hobby tends to go up over time, 1, and 2, because they have like good taste and they actually like stuff, so they end up buying stuff they like, which then like holds better value, et cetera, et cetera. I definitely don't think that those things are necessarily true. I think that people who are viewing this as a business are certainly by and large, hopefully going to make quite a bit more money than people who are collecting, particularly if they're not thinking hard about the finances. I think that makes that's definitely true. You'd think, and 2, hopefully, certainly more than people who are simply like opening packs, right, and just kind of like engaging, you know, which is the majority of the hobby, is more engaging like casually and as a consumer. Definitely, there are people who, like people who have no collection and never put the money back into the cards, but just constantly like are taking money out of the hobby from people who are collecting. So it would really depend on what they're doing with that money. Like, so so if the Pokemon hobby does really well and these cards are very valuable one day, okay, and person A is has a high paying career that's paying all of their bills.
Oh, he reworded it in chat just for clarity. The most recent comment:
kill their internal collector and look at everything from a business perspective. Yeah. I think that okay, so I think that if Pokemon does what Sports Card did over the next 70 years, the richest people in the hobby will be the people who collected the high-end stuff and held it. And the way they were able to do that likely is because they had a very high-paying career outside the hobby, which paid their bills. and then they were able to take the excess of that and like buy cards and be able to hold them. That is a humongous though. What like that may not happen. Like this hobby may not follow the pattern of sports cards that it can last and be that flourishing for that many years. We could be seeing one of the heights of cards right now, which is why the sports card market is so high. In 20 to 30 years, the sports card market could be way down and Pokemon market could be way down, and cards may have had the biggest boom ever during this period. And then I would certainly be you should have sold everything during this period and flipped and made as much money as you possibly could and then had nothing from a financial perspective. But I think his point here is even saying something else too, which is that even if you're holding items, if you're constantly thinking of them from a financial or investment point rather than just liking them, I do think that you'll be more successful than someone just thinking about, do you like the item, for sure. If that's part of your calculation. And it's definitely safer to just be flipping and taking money out of the hobby, particularly if you are making enough that you're actually investing that. I do worry there are people who are spending a lot of time like flipping in the hobby and they're not making that much money. They're not actually able to take that money and invest it somewhere. So they're actually like not making it, like they're not actually like building any sort of investment, right? At alternative investment or traditional investment, I think Dan and I are both on the page of like build traditional investments first and have that sort of nest egg before you build like an alternative asset. And so if I wasn't in that position, what I would do, and flipping cards was like my, obviously Squeaks here is like, and Dan are both make a lot of money and have been doing this many years and have like major businesses. But, being able to make enough money in this hobby so that you're able to, buy a house, invest in real estate, get some sort of, stock portfolio, whatever you find interesting to you, and then start collecting from some of the things that, you make, would probably make most financial sense for most people who are trying to start a business. And so I would agree with Squeaks, I guess, fundamentally here, that like really focusing on like my goal here is to set myself up financially and not to collect, at least for the foreseeable future. And then maybe in the future, once I make enough money, then I will, be able to afford collecting, and be able to what do you think, Dan? Let's see if Squeaks is responding to this also.
Yeah, I started more as a collector, and then I just found I could do it fairly efficiently. I went from the goal of building a collection for free to the excess capital that it threw off. Surpassed my day job. So then I turned it into a business. And I get what he's saying. Like, I'm in many ways, I'm killing my internal collector. There's a lot of pieces that I bought as a collector. I did not buy them as an investment. I did not really buy them for like short-term flip purposes. The market just outpaced my plans for them, expectations for them. The market vastly overvalued them a lot more than I did. And I'm being business-minded, moving those pieces to allow me the capital, the liquidity to transact in my business. As I said, very, very few items I consider these days in my personal collection. There's very few items that I'm adding on an ongoing basis. There's a lot of cards that I have goals to own at some point, but most things that I want to own at some point, it's going to be like, I need to buy them right, and I'm going to buy them to flip them, or I'd love to consign them. I'd love to like not even have to take ownership and just make a margin selling them. So yeah, in a lot of ways, like I have, but you see the things behind me. Like I'm collecting non-cardboard things too. I've been a collector of coins, steins, sports cards back in the day, Pokemon cards now. I've always collected something at one point or another in my life.
I don't want to speak for you, Dan, but I would posit a guess that if Pokemon was cheaper, you would collect it more. But part of what's hard about it is that you don't value it. Like a lot of it is just overpriced to you.
Absolutely.
And so it just doesn't, like, there might be some items that don't seem, but a lot of it has, because you do have some excess money, but probably not enough at this point in your life after you do all of your, traditional investing that you can justify, or that it makes sense putting it into, many $1,000 cards at this point for you.
And my ultimate goal, like my life goal, is to just get to a place of financial independence where my passive investments spit off more money than my family spends, basically. If and when I get to that goal, I could completely change in so many ways. I'm not there yet, and I want to get there. And maybe 10, 20 years from now, maybe I revert back way more than I think I will. Maybe I go back collector boy, start buying up a lot more stuff, not even investment, just like I would still have to buy under market. I would still make a game out of it, buy the value where I see it. But like maybe I just hold a lot more. I'm just not that at that point in my life where I can justify holding things versus like what the market is willing to give me today. And then what I know I can do with that capital in my business.
But yeah, I mean, I think for the vast majority of people, like this advice it would be spot on. What do you think, Dan? I think if you're really serious, like I'm going to replace my income or a large part of my income with this, like you do have to be very serious about like, okay, like how am I going to do that if I'm also collecting? I mean, particularly, if you're collecting, like these cards are extremely expensive. It's like I can't afford to collect $3,000 cards if I'm barely making enough in Pokemon to pay my bills, So
yeah, don't get high off your own supply is a saying, right? And very applicable in this type of market, I think. Every dollar you tie up in your collection, that's just money that's not working for you. If you've got a 50K collection and you're grossing 50K in sales a year, well, you're strapping up half your capital. I mean, you could do double the numbers if you just free up that capital. And then if you're doing well, if you can grow exponentially on that for a matter of years.
Are we predicting 70 years out? Come on, baby. Pokemon is 100% gone. Guaranteed gone.
Honestly, if I had to guess one way or the other, like if I could be alive in 100 years, I probably won't be. 102 I'd be. I would lean towards it being gone, but that's like not very confident. I would say 80% chance it's gone, 20% chance it's around. That's quite a big guess, though.
So, I mean, there are two big pieces of this. There's the cards, which is are cards being collected. And then is the Pokemon IP relevant to people who are still alive and still collecting? And both of those are big questions. And by the way, I think that Pokemon could not be super relevant, but cards could be extremely relevant. And so Pokemon cards are very valuable because they're a key thing that started many, and so you have a lot of people. So there's a lot of ways that they could be valuable. 7 years is not a long time in collectible sort of markets. Now, it's all about, with pop culture, it's all about the staying power of the IP and the staying power of the specific thing. Again, there's examples of like all of the like Superman, Batman, these IPs are 7 years old. Like, I mean, they're huge. They're bigger now than they were. They're way bigger now. I mean, part of it's because there's way more human beings on planet Earth, but a lot of the Marvel characters are getting close, right, to 70 years. Definitely 50 years, right? So to think that an IP, this is the biggest IP that's ever hit planet Earth during a massive social media time, to assume that it will not be here in 70 years, like, seems okay. I mean, I have no idea, like, maybe not. Again, luckily we don't have to decide that now. We can see how things progress and make decisions along the way.
So many, like, you actually brought up a really interesting thing that, like, I've just heard some people talk about conceptually out of interest, out of just like the thought experiment. But a lot of our growth as a society, a lot of our growth in our economies and things like that have just had to do with like raw population growth to some extent, right? I've heard theories and heard speculation that like maybe 10 billion people, approximately 10 billion people is like where the world population might just cap at. Birth rates are going down over the past several years. And yeah, if and when that happens, what number it happens at, like what effect will, not just in Pokemon, but like in the S&P 500, in the world's economies, what will the population not doubling over the next 100 years, what effect will that have? Because in the last 100 years it did, right? I mean, that, or whatever, maybe not 100 years, I don't know when exactly it doubled, but that's a very interesting just thought experiment for like the future of everything.
Yes. I mean, don't get me, yeah, I mean, we don't need to get started on like sort of just like what percentage of people in this world just invest into index funds and don't understand what companies are or what companies they're buying or anything about it. And they're just told that like it's guaranteed and it'll go up and you'll double your money 7%. And you and I also shorthand talk about it that way. I personally buy individual stocks and individual companies that I think will do well and have staying power. And then I do switch in and out of them every 5, 10, 15 years sometimes. But like, whatever, it's 100%. Again, and this is part of what you said. That doesn't, I mean, theoretically that would affect all things equally, right? And so it's sort of like, you just won't see growth in any market, that's solely dependent on just population growth. You'll need more percentage of the stable population to go into your thing or to buy your good or to be involved in your IP or whatever in order to see it grow.
And just for curiosity, I Googled it quickly. 50 years ago in 1973, the world population was about 4 billion. It's close to 8 billion today. So it doubled in about 50 years. And prior to that in 1927, not quite 50 years, but that's the first year they give me data, it was about 2 billion. So it doubled 50 years, every 50 years for the past 100 approximately. And it's not on pace to double in the next 50. So yeah, what effects that will have on everything. Obviously that time frame wasn't relevant to Pokemon as a whole, but interesting things to think about.
I think for the vast majority of people, absolutely should never touch Pokemon TCG in a serious manner at all. They need to spend that money to get skills and get a well-paying career. What I would say to this is that you can touch Pokemon in a serious way with small amounts of money that don't damage you and be serious about it in terms of like being kind of aware of market and have a lot of fun, where you can actually learn really great market skills. You can develop your ability to understand markets. You can network and have friends. You can even build small businesses and part-time stuff in this. I do agree though with the sentiment that like people who are like maxing out credit cards, like putting massive amounts of money in this, and they've been doing this for like half a year, or they were just here during the boom and made money. Like I would definitely agree with that take. And I would agree that, I mean, you saw I just made a whole video about should you buy Pokemon cards, about Pokemon addiction and addiction to cards. And I've had a number of consults recently, unpaid, because I'm not going to charge people to talk about mental health issues. That just feels super icky. But like, just like individual, people just wanting to talk about like, am I addicted to this, Jake? What do you think? Let's have a conversation and non-therapy, just like hang out way. And I do think there's absolutely risk, of all of that stuff. At the same time, you can be serious in a way that is not addicted and in a way that you get a lot of like pleasure and enjoyment, in my opinion. But those lines can be blurred for sure. And, hopefully, people who listen to Dan and I know how, that we try to be really cautious of that. We don't want to have, I speak for myself. I personally would, I don't want like our Discord, our Patreon, our channels to be a place that enables people to make, do our part to not enable people to do things that hurt themselves. Like, people at the end of the day are going to do what they're going to do. But like, yeah, we don't want to put out the message that like, we don't want to enable or encourage behavior that Dan and I don't think's helpful to an individual. What do you think about this concept, this idea, or what I said?
Yeah, I'm assuming touching Pokemon in a serious manner is with respect to like investing in it. Essentially, I think obviously anyone engaging in it in a healthy way with money that they have, entertainment wise, absolutely. Like, you need to have fun in life. You need to enjoy it. And if Pokemon brings you that, like, go for it. But if you're touching it in a way, seriously investing high portions of your net worth, if you have a negative net worth and you're doing this on credit cards, things like that, I mean, my channel, I have many videos, many live streams. I talk about it all the time. Investing in productive assets that generate income, especially in tax sheltered accounts, all that jazz that I always say. Buying anything that's crypto, that's Pokemon cards, that's any non-productive thing that you need someone to just buy from you for more money down the line. that's just inherently a lot more risky, I think. Well, not even I think, just it's objectively a lot more risky needing someone else to buy it for more money.
The truth is you can pretty much buy anything from a retailer right now and make money in 5 years. It's not guaranteed, but I'm glad you said not guaranteed. So you're not going to get quite as intense of an answer from Dan and I. But history is certainly on its side. Even before the boom, this was true.
Just this is the point.
It depends on the moment in history.
This is the thing that I said. One mistake people make. 2023 is 1 year. Today is 1 day in the 25-year history of Pokemon. If you look at it that way, 100% of things produced in the past are higher today, right? That's the premise of this whole argument that people make today. I say, instead of looking at every item, every data point on 1 day, I say look at the whole 25-year timeline. And for at least a decade of that, a lot of it was down substantially. So not today 100% of things are up. I would say for 40% of the history of Pokemon, a lot of things were down. I think that's the safer way and more reasonable way to logically look at it and think about it. What do you think? Like 60% of the time, a lot of things were up. Most things were up. Everything. 40% of the time, no. Almost half the time of Pokemon's 25-year history, a lot of things were down. And I just think that's the more prudent way to look at it.
Yeah. I don't have anything to add. I've talked about that so much.
Just a lot of people. It's really scary. Today is 1 day. It's one set of data points for 1 day. And a lot of people do that.
How can you say in 7 years when the average home didn't even have a TV 7 years ago and technology developed such a growth, the world looks like 7 years should be so far? Yeah, I mean, absolutely it could be so far. And I don't think I'm making a claim that anything definitely is going to happen. I just said if what does happen is a similar sort of thing to sports cards or some of these long-term pop culture hobbies that still exist, you have Star Wars 50 years now, you have, Marvel, getting to that 70-year period, like, if Pokemon exists in 70 years. Now, again, we don't need to say that now. It doesn't need to be 70 years. It could be 50, it could be 40, it could be 30. And it's risk. So it's all about the price point. So for example, like if I'm buying, like right now, like if I'm buying cards at $3 to $4, like serialized, Star Wars cards, for example, right? And I have to think, well, over the next 50 years, will there ever be a 6-month period, a 1-month period, a 5-year period where an influencer, where someone will talk about those, where there can be some movement, there can be some attention around those? It doesn't need to just be linear. There could be moments in history when Pokemon becomes really hot again that you could sell into. It doesn't have to be this like constant linear thing that Pokemon is super popular for 70 years or Star Wars is super popular at Marvel. But for sure, it's all risk. And to try to predict like demand in terms of like what the demand will look like in 70 years, will it be more, will it be less? It's a highly, highly speculative. The farther you go out, the more speculative it is. Particularly for stuff that for like the newest sets or for things that are, aren't even a few years old. A lot of these things don't even have 5 years behind them to know how people are going to think about them, let alone in 10, 20, 30 years. But I will say the biggest IPs from the social media age have stood the test of time and, like those that I mentioned. Now there were other ones and other major characters that have fallen out of fashion. Could Pokemon be one of those that fall out of fashion? I mean, people are saying in the chat, I saw some like, we're going to be on Mars, there's going to be a nuclear war. Then nothing, right? Like always 5% that or 10% that or 15% that. Just like invest in canned food or like, I don't know, like build a rocket. Like, I don't know, like sure, like for sure, whatever. But like barring, thinking life is going to be fairly similar to what it is now, which could be, again, and what I said is it's not just Pokemon that's at risk, it's cards that are at risk. We could be living in a purely digital world. We could be living purely online. We could be strapped to machine. Like nobody really knows. Or it could be like fairly similar. It could be less technology than it is now. There could be a push against it and people go back to collecting and people, again, it only has to be a hit for 6 months of any time over the next 70 years. And for me to sell into that, if I think the risk reward makes sense. So it's investing in pop culture stuff and investing in these types of things. Like playing sort of a long-term investing sort of mindset, you need to have that type of mindset. And that comes from studying history and seeing which IPs, which things survived, which parts of those IPs survived, when did they become valuable, how did they become valuable again, and then trying to pick good points to come in, pick good prices to come in, and then you sort of see what happens. But it's way less of a sure thing than arbitraging product constantly into a market and taking money out constantly, like, for sure.
I think within 70 years, we're going to go like Matrix. You just plug yourself in. You don't even live in the normal world. You live in the digital world. Ready Player One, San Junipero, Black Mirror. We're just living in some alternate digital reality. Some interesting stuff in the live chat. Oh man,
what are people saying? I'm not looking at the bottom.
Oh, all kinds of stuff all over the place.
Little drug use in the chat.
Yeah. Mason's talking about there potentially could be a resident of his dumpster tonight out back of his store. Oh man,
I do think that people do underestimate, like, sometimes they overestimate the power of the Pokemon brand, and sometimes they underestimate it and sometimes it goes so quick. It's like, we just have the greatest set ever that will last for the rest of the world, but definitely Pokemon will be gone in like 10 years. And it's not necessarily the same person saying it. It's very interesting. Like, for me, again, I look to history and I look to what other IPs have done. Like don't look to yourself. You don't freaking know. Like, I don't know. Like, that's all I can say on it. It's like,
Sean from Reserved Investments, who you had on before, and I watch a lot of his videos. He had a video on like the Lindy effect recently. Basically, the older something is that's still culturally relevant, way more likely that's so like, yeah. Superman is more likely to be relevant in 70 years because he has been relevant for 70 years than Pokemon is. Like, proportionally, statistically speaking, if you take
that the only counter argument I would have is, yes, if all things being equal, but the fact that Pokemon has so much more of the market share now and is geared towards younger people, and are younger people adopting those DC characters because the Marvel, like, et cetera, and like
but I honestly, like, Spider-Man is probably, I don't even know how old Spider-Man is specifically.
Fundamental, like, stands though. Like, all things being equal, the longer something has been popular, the more inertia.
He talked more about like Beethoven versus Nirvana, I think he used, or something, because you have one that's hundreds of years. Yeah, the general premise,
you have a sort of historical importance. Like, something becomes like a societally historically important versus just like, when does pop culture like go from being like, this is a fad, to like, this is an important part of human history. And I would, the Smithsonian Museum is a great example, filled with pop culture. There are things that sort of enter into, American history, and then there are things that could enter into world history, and trying, because there's also sort of like, where's the Star Wars, where's the DC, where's the Marvel market versus the Pokemon market, which could be like a broader world, in so many. There are pluses and minuses to all of these things. The point is just, do you think critically, think about history, compare this to other things. And the good news is, like, you don't have to decide, are you going to hold the Pokemon cards for 70 years? You can, every day decide to sell them, move on. No, but I think there's definitely, although I do think one thing, I think that people think that time is their friend when often it is not, because often time makes things irrelevant. So, the whole like, older, rarer, minter, better, if relevant, but if not relevant, older, bad. Older can be worse, and older can make things like super, nobody knows about them, nobody cares about them, whatever. Now again, I hate to keep harping on this, but your middle generation Pokemon stuff, like, they could, like, I don't think this, but like, people don't even consider that like the older vintage stuff could go up over time and not the current sets right now, and that the current sets right now could go out of favor. And there are examples of this from sports, whatever. It's just drilling this point into the ground, and then people will say no, and it's like, I'm not saying that it will happen. I'm trying to explain all of the different possible scenarios.
Yeah.
What we try to do here is challenge thinking, challenge your preconceived notions of value. Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is another thing. How do Pokemon games evolve in the future? And just like, how do they keep adding more Pokemon? And I think about,
we're at 1,000. We're over 1,000 with Scarlet Violet.
If there are thousands of more, then do certain Pokemon become more important and become more collectible if Pokemon is still relevant? Does it start to matter more? There's all sorts of ways you can go with that. Let's see. Which Pokemon card selling website are you guys searching right now? Right now, or in general?
I'm assuming he's asking people in chat that primarily.
Oh.
People working in the background while they're watching.
Yeah. I feel most sealed investors won't even last 5 years because they will sell as soon as there are profits to be had. If you had to put a percentage on it, I guess how many go at least 5 years holding? So, I mean, my first thought is like, who are they selling to? Are they selling to just another investor who's, so it's like, it's still being held. Okay. So what the point of this is, he isn't saying that this will help it. I was kind of reading into that with the other. So I'll just answer it straightforwardly. So if you had to put a percentage on it, guess how many, oh my God.
So like, how many people investing in Evolving Skies today will actually hold it 5 years from now? Will they have sold because the price went up too much, or will they have just ripped because they caved and decided to rip it? What percent? I have no idea.
Yeah, I was forced to give an answer on what I think the Moonbreon is going to be like in a year from now in my last, and I can't believe I answered it. I can't believe I broke down and gave a number. It's like, there's so many factors that are out of my control that I don't know, that I couldn't even give an educated guess. And I know how people work. They're like, they just want the number. They don't like all the explanation. They just want the number. Give them a number.
I had multiple people send a clip to me of me saying that like the likely trajectory of Moonbreon, I think it was up 800-ish at the time.
Yeah.
I think I said it might go up in the interim. I don't know what it will do short term, but I said long term, I think it'll just trickle down from here. I think it'll largely trickle down from here for the next several years. And what it did was it doubled first. Yeah. It doubled to 16, and then it trickled down, and then it hit 800. Now it hit 1,000 again. People think it's going back to 2,000. Like, I still think, quote me today, I think Moonbreon in 10 years, maybe in real terms, inflation adjusted, whatever, $500. I think it's going to just trickle down from here.
So here, I was forced to give my opinion and say exactly what it was. And here's the problem. This is the real problem. We have no idea if they're going to reprint. We have no idea how much sealed Evolving Skies is left out there. We have no idea how much more is going to be opened. All we know, this is all anyone knows, no matter how strong their opinion is. Right now, a lot of people say it's their favorite card and they think it's great. And I'm not implying that they're going to stop, but a lot of people are saying that. We cannot say that they're definitely going to keep feeling that. No one can make that claim. It has the most attention of probably any card, the most people talking about it, the most people kind of interested in it, right? Too. Every week, so there's something like 4,000 PSA 10s graded as an 83% roughly graded ratio. This is just PSA. Already has 3,900 or something to 4,000. In the next year, and there are 100 being graded every week. So 100 new ones are being graded every week right now. So if that pace kept itself, you'd add 6,000 more in the next year. With just 4,000 being graded, you're seeing about 20 on the market every second being auctioned. So now here's where that may not happen. Those are facts, but one thing that may not happen, it could dramatically stop being graded all of a sudden because no more are being opened up. And even though it's actually increased, I've been watching carefully, there's more being graded every week now than there were, which would imply that, like, why would there be more right before they're zero. It's possible because of PSA lowering their prices. Like, you never know. And this is why being forced to give a price point is so stupid, because I have like great information that I'm sharing about this card. I have all of the vital key information. This is what's useful, guys, is hearing those 5 things and then you making a decision based on them. It's not like pretending that any of us can, so whatever. So what I would say is like the demand stuff, people could keep making videos. Maybe the new sets are kind of a flop, and that would make this stay more popular for longer. Maybe the new cards are not as popular as alt arts, which makes people want the alt arts more. We don't know that. We haven't experienced that because every time the alt arts were more popular than the previous generation. Maybe this new generation is less popular than this generation. That might make the alt arts do better and the demand stay high. Maybe they don't reprint Evolving Skies. This is the bullish case, right? Maybe they don't reprint Evolving Skies. Maybe all of a sudden it slows down. Maybe people keep making videos about this, keep saying it's great. And maybe there's a ton of people in the market right now who really want one, who aren't buying because they think the price will go down. And then when they see that it doesn't go down, and when they see that not many of them are being graded, they buy in, and then this card goes to 1,600 or 2,000. That is a realistic scenario, but it's one that's like you gotta, it's like, now here's
you gotta
another
do weighted percentages. Yeah, you gotta put a number, a percentage, calculate it out.
I'm a real estate investor. I do and I'm analyzing bell curves all day, where I'm putting these and I'm saying, okay, this 5% chance of this, 15% chance of this. What's our base? This is what I'm doing, right? And you can do that. You could sit down and do this with your card, and you could put percentages, right? Now, I think the most likely scenario is that you have about 4,000 to 6,000 more graded the next year, which doubles the supply. I think the new generation won't be quite as popular as this generation, but I think it'll take a lot of the YouTube attention away. I think there's only so much that they can make the same videos of the same cards. So I think some of the attention will move away, not all of it. I think people will still like it, but I think you're going to double the supply. I think which is going to be tougher to take. And I think more likely you're going to see like, a $350 to $500 to $600 card or something like that, which is what I was like pushed to say basically. But it's like, if the really bullish scenario happens and it gets to 1,500 to 2,000, like as long as you understand all of the scenarios and you understand the odds, you are correct. Like, you've done the work. You can't now. It's just make a guess, make an estimate off of that. If you're lucky, you'll be right. And now if the estimate is you really don't know and it's 50-50, it's gambling. You're gambling, guys. Right? This is not an investment. You're not investing. You're deluding yourself if you think if you're investing, because this is where using that word is crazy, because I just laid out the different fundamentals, and nobody knows exactly. Those are all the important ones that I can think of, and nobody knows exactly where all of those are going to go. So, and because you don't have that confidence, I don't care how strong your opinion is. It's like, it's just not that useful. So now you can gamble on the positive side. You can gamble on the negative side. For me, I would gamble slightly on the negative side, but not enough that if I could short this card, I'd have the option to short it, because it's really not that, it's not going to fall that much, and it could very well double. And it wouldn't be a good investment. So for me, it's just a pass. And there's plenty of things that I think have better fundamentals, better upside, less downside, or as good upside, less downside, particularly in other hobbies. But that's my overall analysis. I don't know if you want to add anything, Dan, but it's just like, for me, it's just like, so like, people are going to be like, they said that. It's like,
but what's the most likely scenario? 10 years from today, in 2023 dollars, because we don't know what inflation will be. So in 2023 dollars, $500 PSA 10. That's my whole thing.
Now I can't even. It's really hard to predict this in a year, let alone 5 years. Then we're taking
that is one of at least 100 possible scenarios that has the highest weighting, 3% chance of that happening. But it's the single highest, and people only want one answer. So I'm going to give that one. $500 PSA 10 in 10 years in 2023 dollars though. So that might be $1,000 if inflation averages 7% per year for the next 10 years. That might be $500 if there's no inflation between now and then. That's my guess. People want one number. I gave them one number.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, sure. 500. Sure. Guaranteed. You heard it here. Clip this part for 10 years.
Moonbryon in
The thing is, like,
2033 will be $500 in 2023 inflation adjusted dollars.
yeah, the most important thing in investing is like knowing what you know and what you don't know, and being not having an ego and being honest about what you can predict and what you can't
I
predict.
don't know anything. That's why I flip.
Yeah, and I think for me, I don't know things, and so I need the and you and I have talked about this, like the like the implied odds, the potential return is so amazing. It's why you got into Metazoo, right? It's the same idea, but like the potential implied sort of odds of like, I'm getting this at such a low price, and I think there are all these very realistic possibilities why it could be way more expensive than this, and way less possibilities why it could be very cheap. Like, that's what I'm looking for in these markets. And I do think that it's appropriate to use the word investing for that. But yeah, if you're adding in the ability to flip and arbitrage and get stuff already below market, it just makes it more and more attractive. It's the same thing in investing in real estate. If I have a connection where I can buy the house at below market and I'm going to hold it for a little bit because I think I have an investment thesis, now I'm doubly good. I've made money theoretically on sort of getting it under market on a potential flip. And I think the market is in my favor for macro reasons or whatever, et cetera, et cetera. All right. If Jake highlights that comment, I will ascend. I have to find it.
It's his prior comment prior to that one.
The only fine, I'll do it for you, Mason. Just because
they were big the past 15 minutes. I think Mr. Walrus made a comment about vasectomies, about the future growth of the hobby slowing because less reproduction. And then they went on down a rabbit hole.
I love like Squeaks and other people answering this stuff seriously, right? Like giving long responses.
We had Mr. Walrus has a very interesting way of livening up chat because we had our last 10 minutes of Poke Flips on Thursday was just like highlighting people's quotes. And then when people saw me highlighting every quote, they threw out some really interesting ones. That's the way the chats go.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Ridiculous, dude.
Maybe scroll back an hour and start finding things because chat's been
I skipped a bunch of questions in the middle to try to get to you guys. And this is what I found.
Jake skips all those mid-era questions to come up to this ultra modern live chat mess.
Are collectors born or made, Dan? Oh.
Is it the nature versus nurture debate? I think nature. I think they're born. I don't know if you can make a collector.
Yeah, I don't know. Both.
I think it's more nature than nurture. Ben sitting.
Yeah, I think it's definitely. I mean, I think that yeah, I actually read some interesting books on it. I just don't feel like going. Like, I don't think he wants me to. I don't think anyone wants me to answer this.
Too much nuance for 1:20 a.m.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm willing to go for another. What do you think, Dan?
3 hours, 6 hours. I don't know.
3 to 6.
Yeah.
We'll go for another 6 hours. Let's start bringing some people on. We got 137 people watching it.
Yeah.
1:21 in the morning. Who wants to jump on? Should I start sharing the link?
Oh God. With the way the live chat's going, I'm a little worried how it could end up.
Yeah. 24
basic.
hours.
Yeah.
No, actually, I've been doing a good job of taking care of myself and not going online too much recently. I've been spending a lot of time doing other things. But I do eventually, once I hit 10,000, I'm going to do something insane. 10,000 subscribers. I'll definitely do something like that.
Ugh.
I'm going to have everyone who's ever appeared on the channel come on over 24 hours, something like that.
I think Basic's going to be the first one to break the 24-hour threshold.
he told me he was going to, and I jumped on the stream to do my part for a few hours, but
Yeah, you got to schedule it and just pick guests that'll take 2 to 3 hour slots. I mean, I'll take a 2 or 3 hour slot in Basics 24-hour live for sure.
basically like someone said going live for an unreasonable amount of time. All right, we have an idea for a video where we go on to Basics channel because Dan and I are too afraid to do this on our own channels because we're too afraid of the backlash and the negativity. So we want it to be on someone else's channel. We want to go on Basics channel with a bunch of like other people, and we want to react to like the 10 most dramatic Pokemon videos of the year.
As just like fill up a StreamYard. I mean, 10 people are allowed. You might as well just get 10 people on screen.
As a thing we do every year. I would definitely watch that video. 10 most dramatic videos of the year. 10 dramatic hobby moments of the year.
Silent actually had a good question a few minutes ago, right towards the bottom.
Ooh, an actual question.
An actual question, yeah.
Silent.
Multiple part.
You're saving the stream. I don't see it.
It was at 120.
120.
Right after Mr. Walrus memeing. Always memeing.
Oh. How did I miss that? Sorry. Silent. Silent. If you're looking to buy a specific card, what's the process for you? Do you look for raw first, then graded 10s, then 9s, etc.? Or do you look for graded first and compare raw value after? Great question. That's a great question.
The answer people always love, it depends. If it's an ultra modern card that's being graded 80% in PSA 10s, if I can go to TCG Player, very likely buy a near mint that is going to be mint plus as it was pulled from a pack. I'm way more likely on an ultra modern card to just look at raw, especially when Moonbreon's 500 raw, 1,000 graded 10, 80% of them that are being sent are grading 10s. But if I'm looking at like a vintage one that's been around more, a little more fleshed out, I might look at all three. I might look at like, okay, what's 1098 raw? What's the cost to pull it? The cost to pull it is almost always going to be way too high. So yeah, it depends definitely on the card, and then it depends on your goals too. Like if your 10s are bust, more often than not, generally speaking, the older stuff, you're probably better off buying the 10s. But if you're happy with 9s, like look at the 9s, look at the raw. If 9s are, like we were talking about the XY and black and white era full arts. If you can buy a 9 and you're a 9 collector for what they go for raw near mint that are probably going to be a PSA 7 or 8, the 9's the play, right? It all depends on your goals and what specific cards you're talking about.
Okay. If you're looking to buy a specific card, what's the process? You look for raw first. So yeah, I mean, first is definitely like, what's my goal here? Is it a binder copy, or am I looking for, a graded at the end of the day? Is it collector? Is it, flipper? Is it investor? Whatever. Investor, collector obviously is together. Let's just say that I'm looking for a graded card for the sake of this question. I'm looking to get it graded. So do I go raw first? So yeah, so I check everything. I don't know what order because it doesn't matter. Like I would just check all of it, to be honest. Let's see, what would I do? Okay, so I'm looking. The first thing I would do is I'd go for the graded first. I would look to see what the graded price is going for. I would look at it in 10. I'd look at it in 9. I'd look at the population report. I'd look at what it's been selling for. I'd look where it was trending. If I was really serious and it was expensive and it was, it would be worth putting this amount of time. Then I would look to see what were the last sold. Was it the same cert? I would actually go into the bids to make sure that I felt like it was legitimate, that I felt like the people who were buying it had a decent number of reviews, seemed like real people. This didn't seem shilled. This didn't seem manipulated. I would get a sense, and then I would put a price basically on what I think the 10 is worth right now, what I think the 9 is worth right now. Then once I've done that, then I go to raw and I see how much raw costs. Obviously, if it's you have to know the era. So some eras, cards are much harder to grade. Obviously, the older something is, the more you have to worry about just like age attrition, which means like damage from just being opened and out in the planet for years. But there are also some sets, even in middle gen, even recent sets, cards that are harder to grade. And so you want to look at the percent. So for like modern stuff, like TCG Player is a great source to just like buy the card. Oftentimes near mint there could be a 9 or 10, usually is, if it's a fairly easy to grade modern card, which most modern cards are. Some modern cards have a lower grade rate. whatever. If it's a hard to grade card and the the 9 is about the price of like a near mint and the 10 is about double, kind of talked about this earlier in the night, I'll just buy the 10 or the 9, depending on which one I value more, depending on which one I want in my collection. If it's a modern card and the 8s are going for about the cost of near mint, I'm very likely to grade it myself. That's an oversimplification because it also depends on the prices. And like if the prices are all very close together, I'm probably not going to waste my time and try to grade something. I'll just buy the 10. If the 10, and this is why sometimes 10 sell for 30, 40, 50 bucks.
That's what I was going to say.
It doesn't bother me at all. It makes sense, right? Because and a person could have bought that just because they didn't want to save $10. They didn't want to take the risk and spend the time. Okay.
If your favorite card in the hobby is Sword Shield 50 and you can buy it on auction for $25 on PSA 10,
why not?
You can't even buy sealed. Like sealed is like $12, grading is 15.
Yeah. For example, like a Moonbrown would be a great example of where I would buy the raw because it has like an 83% 10 rate right now. Obviously, that's inflated because people are not sending in the worst graded copies.
And the 9's like break even though. The 9's like
right. Yeah. You want to look to make sure that. So that's a situation where even though you're at that 9-10, because it's quite easy to grade, because they tend to be pretty good. Now, different print runs of Evolving Skies could change things. Like this is where it'll be interesting if they do another big print run, like how that could shift it. You have to be very up on all of those things. People often think this is way easier than it is. It's easy if you do all the steps we said. It's straightforward. None of this stuff takes a genius, but you have to know all the little pieces because I see people grading things they shouldn't grade all the time. I see people buying raw when they should just buy the graded. You have to sit and you have to do the math and you have to understand the risk reward. So for me, I generally am pretty risk avoidant. Like I'd rather pay a little extra to get what I definitely want. I'm definitely in the camp of I would rather make sure money or get a card that I really want if I think the card is undervalued than try to get an amazing deal and then lose out on potentially getting it all together, if that makes sense. So that's my approach to investing, collecting, what have you. All right. Okay, what is going on here, fellas, in this thread?
They're back on vasectomies.
This is very disappointing.
Oh my god. Someone save us.
Oh no. Squeaks has a serious question about vasectomies here to get us back on track.
I saw that one.
All right. Any more? Or here's a question. Any updates on the overall direction of Pokenomics? We can talk about our Patreon too for this, I suppose. Any goals for 2023? Landing Rudy in a live stream, hosting an indie convention, training, etc. How about you, Dan? What are your goals for your channel, for our Patreon, for our work together? Just your overall, what's going on in the hobby, and then I'll answer it. And if there are no new serious questions, we could probably just that's probably a good time to end.
My goals for my channel, just my business, my channel overall is just keep doing what I'm doing, get more efficient, do it bigger, better, slow and steady growth though. Not looking to I don't think I'm ever going to have a viral video pop off, 100,000 subscribers, anything crazy. Just keep doing what I'm doing. I think it's working well. I'm having fun doing it. And I mean, Pokenomics, obviously Pokenomics is the name of your channel and the Patreon side of it. I am rooting for you to
figure out what to change it to or how to change it. It's been a struggle trying to come up with a name that represents both of us, but also is like the economics of Pokemon. That's
Pokenomics fits it well. Yeah,
that's a goal for the next year.
Yeah, goal for 2023 is to come up with a name for it so that it can be a distinct, different thing from this YouTube channel. But I think similar on the Pokenomics front. I mean, I think we've got a good community there. We've got a really good, engaging Discord. We have the fun. I know the last few weeks, if not couple months, the office hours have really we'll be in there for the first hour every time. Sometimes a couple hours we'll even hang out, stay in, and they go for several hours. I mean, there's times where you had an office hour 4 hours after your office hour ended. I hopped in because there was 20 people in there, and just so I really like that. I really like the engagement, just the continual conversations around this, and not even always Pokemon. I mean, sometimes it's just like life, right? You'll be hopping in, starting to talk about the Pokemon market, and you'll end with vasectomy talk, talking about sports, talking about whatever's going on. So yeah, more of the same with Pokenomics. Like, continue doing what we're doing. Hopefully build it. Hopefully just make a cool community that people can just hang out, engage more in depth into the hobby that we all love and share the passion for. And then, yeah, every few months, we're going to try to bring on a new guest, give a new angle, give a new perspective, talk about their niche corner of the market, what they do, how they engage. That's generally what it is, I guess.
I invited Rudy to come on the channel last year. He responded to me and said he doesn't go on anyone's channels. His usual answer he gives to everyone. I've seen him in the chat a few times and commenting on videos, so I know he's watched the channel. But unfortunately, he's not. That would be awesome to have him on for a live stream, like an actual candid one where we challenged him and talked about like actually shared opinions, and be interesting.
It'd be super interesting.
Yeah, it would be great. But I don't know. I think he would have like a great time. Like, I think it would be a great time. I did talk. Yeah, I shouldn't say that.
People aren't gonna like that.
Yeah, I know. So hosting an indie convention. I am working on a convention, hopefully this year, if not next year, with some great people who are doing a lot of the work, including the guy who's going to be probably doing the most work for it. I won't announce any of that, but like, I certainly won't be able to take like credit for this as like my convention, but I'll definitely be, helping with it. I'll be, one of the 2 or 3 people kind of leading the charge to do it. Yeah, have a venue, or hopefully have like an investor, a person who can like fund it, and et cetera. We'll be putting, money and time into it as well. I'll let you guys know about that if it comes to fruition. These things, like, it could not, obviously. I like talking about these things. I think it's fun. I'm definitely going to try to make it come, but happen. But yeah, you never know for sure. I am doing a trade night with Nick and Dan TCG coming up in 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks.
Is that a Saturday?
Yeah, Saturday. I think it's the 28th, I want to say. You can look at our Instagram stories. We'll be doing more of them.
I was going to say, I hope it's Saturday, because Sunday we've got the monthly Zoom.
That's true. Yeah. We could do it from there. So doing that, we're going to do a few more trade nights, just local stuff. A few people have contacted me saying, is it worth driving from like 9 hours away? And I told them, no, definitely not. I really appreciate the support, but I really don't want you to come and be disappointed.
Yeah,
like, and I'm just going to answer very honestly. I do not think it's worth. I think it's a great time. There's going to be like, 50 to 100 people. Hopefully, again, people are really awesome. You're going to see a lot of cool cards. You could make some really cool trades, but like, there's probably closer events to, I would hope, hopefully
it's certainly not going to be like a Collecticon or anything like that.
Yeah. And it's not, and it's not, and like, there just probably are going to be similar events, hopefully closer to you, wherever you are, is what I told these people. And like, I would just do some research and look, and I would focus more on like, if you want to hang out with all of us, like, come to a Collecticon. Obviously it's expensive, I know. And that's part of why I do want to do this event that'll hopefully be cheaper for people. Again, it's in the works. That would be a type of event that I would hope people would drive, 9 hours to come. I would certainly drive 9 hours to go to it. You and I have said this before about things we've done. We try to do things that like we would come to, and we would we would be a part of for the amount of money and the value. This is one I would not come to, this one day thing, but a whole weekend thing hopefully would be worth it. Okay, so that's the trade nights, the indie convention part. As far as like live streams and channel goals, just kind of continue doing what I'm doing. I'm enjoying it, trying not to burn myself out with it. Fairly consistent, but I'm not going to be putting pressure on myself. It's definitely not like Dan's channel. It's going to be more, regular and more business like. This is going to be more, probably a video or 2 a week. If I do have stuff that I feel like is really pressing to say, I like doing them in lives and starting the live with it because I just think it's a lot better to do this stuff live. When people do the other videos, they re-record themselves. They think very carefully about what they're going to say. I like to just I think about it before, and then we're just going to sort of let the cards fall where they fall. I actually find I find the challenge really fun. As well, and I think it's fun to hopefully it's more fun for people too to kind of hear the unfiltered sort of rambling with occasional insight. What else? Yeah, so more of the same probably from the channel. I have people, I think a few people commented, I have like new lights, so like everything's like lit up better. I'm going to be showing more cards on the channel for sure. While we talk, I probably will do some openings this year and just kind of like hang out and open cards with people. So, every once in a while, there'll be little things like that. Hopefully Dan will visit at some point and we'll open a bunch of product. I'll lure him.
I do need to make a Massachusetts trip for sure. I got to pay you back.
Yeah, I'll bring Nick and Dan will come over and we'll
that'll actually be awesome. Yeah, we got to plan that.
Yeah. And what else? Yeah, as far as the Patreon, thank you all so much who support us there. Like it's awesome. We continue to really enjoy doing it. We're continuing to bring on. I don't know if we should announce our next guest yet, but yeah, we have some cool guests coming up. And Dan will be doing it this month. Again, you get the Discord with that. I've had people ask me about the Discord. That's where the Discord is connected to the Patreon. You sign up for the Discord once you sign up for Patreon, which is $10 a month at the lowest fee. And yeah, you get all of the backlog of all of like the videos we've done. There's tons and tons of hours of in-depth kind of content where we go more in depth on actual numbers. We show a lot more numbers. A lot of the themes we talk about on our channels, but we show kind of more data and numbers. And you can also support me if you're ever buying something by clicking the eBay affiliate link I have down. Dan also has one on his channel. Go support him on his channel as well. Just continue supporting YouTubers in the space. I think if you appreciate this type of content, you appreciate me and Dan, we have a lot of content creators here in the chat. You appreciate all of their channels. It's a nice thing to do. I know that when I'm buying something, I try to click, my friends and other people's affiliate links, those types of things. It's always appreciated. And we'll just
if you think the eBay affiliate links, if you think eBay charges too much, you can make them get less by clicking that link. It costs you no more, and it siphons off some of that to your favorite content creators.
What else? I guess that's it. That's planned right now. Yeah, Silent and I worked with some other people on a potential like game show thing I want to do on my channel at some point. Hopefully we will revisit that. We need to talk about that Silent soon. And see what's happening with that. I guess that's it. Yeah. Subscribe to my channel, subscribe to Dan. Help me get to 10,000 because I'm going to do something funny for it. And that would just be like, once I get to 10,000, I'm just going to be like, I don't really care about subs anymore. That sort of like was always my internal goal. Yeah. Any last minute thing, Dan? Are you good?
I'm just trying to think. At my current pace, 10,000 would come in like 5 years. The way I'm going, a little over 5 years. So it's a nice number. 10,000 is a nice round number.
Wait till the boom, man. The boom is gonna go.
Oh yeah, that next boom, I'm gonna be carried right up in it. 10K easy. Probably happen this year even. I mean, 10K by 2024.
Is Basic going live right now? Should we go raid him? Basic, go live.
Yeah. Basic go live. Yeah.
Is anyone live right now to go raid?
Oh, let me search. Let me see. None of my subscriptions doesn't look like.
All right, everyone go to Basic's channel and only subscribe if he goes live. Unsubscribe if he doesn't actually.
Yeah. So Basic sub numbers. I mean, there's probably some overlap, but it's either going to go up by 100 or down by like 30 or 40 or something. Yeah, Basic after party.
What's this Phillips video? Do you know this? Are these memes in chat?
I haven't watched a little bit recently.
There's some good questions here now. I guess, I mean, we could take a couple more after we did all that, but I do want to go to bed pretty soon. I enjoy talking with Dan here. These streams always go longer than I anticipate.
3 hours flies by, and so does 9 hours.
And, yeah, you and I had a 5-hour conversation not too long ago that was meant to be like probably 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, Squeaks. Here's a question. What would you do if you bought a collection that had several other miscellaneous cards or items you're not familiar with and had no gauge of value? Would I take the time to learn it all or not? Interesting question, particularly given Dan's
very timely
through this.
It's kind of like I'm actively in this. I bought a really amazing Pokemon collection for like $23K that I knew Pokemon. I could look at it really quickly and I could assess its value and I knew there was money there. So I bought it. And then he had $25K for Dragon Ball Z, DBS, Yu-Gi-Oh, Weiss, Naruto, all kinds of stuff. And I'm looking at some of the lower end cards. I'm talking about $1, $5 raw, and some of them are going for 50, 100 graded. More and more, I'm thinking just taking the top 20%, Pareto principle. 80% of the value will lie in 20% of the cards, and maybe even further, the extension of that. 64% of the value will lie in 4% of the cards. So I'm probably just gonna like take the biggest stuff off the top and then like pass it on to people, just sell binder lots, sell big lots to people who are more specialized in that. And because it's all like a cost benefit analysis of your time, right? How much free time you have, how deep you want to go. So yeah, there's a certain depth I'll go, and I'll probably make videos with respect to that specific collection on where I stopped and why I stopped there. Diminishing returns as you go down.
Yeah, I'm one who like I love the knowledge and the learning, and because I'm not a business, I tend to whenever I see something, I get excited not just for a financial reason, but for I want to learn and I want to figure out what it is. So I tend to look, but that's not good advice from a business who's having to get through lots of lots. I would follow Dan's advice or Nick's advice, on some of the lower value stuff, and Danny, Mason, all these guys. Most people say they make money and collect basically for free. Everything I bought ever since I joined back the hobby is selling for way less than what I paid. I'm hopeful for a new boom sooner else. Yeah, I mean, first of all, most people a lot of people have never sold anything. A lot of people are fundamentally collecting, and a lot of people have bought some stuff and lost a decent amount, but really enjoy what they have. And I don't think any of that's problematic unless you need to make money off of this as a business. So it's like, I think if you want to set a goal, I mean, one thing I know, like for myself, is like, because I want to get to a really big collection and buy really big cards, I'm always trying to think strategically that way, but that doesn't need to be everyone's goal. And I don't know, unless you are in Pokemon, like unless you invested in a lot of alt arts, or you invested in some like Worlds cards, or you invested in some like niche Pikachu promos over the last year or two, like, or you've invested in like some sealed modern product, like, you haven't made money. Like, full stop. So the only way you would have made money is if you graded you bought singles and you graded them, and so you made money on the grading, or you bought collections and you sold off parts of it and then graded some of it and you made money on that. Like, anyone else is just making money on like gains that they realized from the boom still. So you're not doing anything stupid. It's not like you're like buying the wrong WotC, PSA 9 first edition card. Like, yes, there are some that have gone down more than others, and there are some that are flat or like ever so slightly up. And like you could have made better or worse decisions within that. But I just want to say that like it's not like unless you're really using a lot of the tactics that we talk about, particularly in this market, there weren't like a lot of sleepers that like it's why I haven't invested in any Pokemon cards in like years, except for Worlds promos. That were literally the only investment buys I made were Worlds promos mainly, and then I put in about $3,000 into like Sun and Moon era stuff, basically, which for me is a very small portion compared to the amount of money I was putting into Worlds promos or Star Wars or other hobbies. Like so. And that stuff I'm prepared to hold for a long time, that $3,000. And if I were to sell it now, I would lose money after fees. It's about flat, basically. The graded cards I bought are about flat. They're a little up. It's like, because I bought them under market, but it's like $5. And then after shipping and fees, I'm basically flat to maybe $1 plus all the time. Even if I make $5 a card, it's basically flat. But the baby shinies, I could make money, but it would be a freaking grind. I just bought them so low. It's like, yes, I could actually triple my money on those, but like it's terrible.
A quarter at a time. Yeah,
exactly. Right. So that's the situation with all of those. So just to give a little bit of perspective, maybe for people. Jake, would you please summarize the nature versus nurture topic? Oh man, I'm sorry. A different time. I just can't do it. I can't do nurture versus
video.
Yeah. Like the short and long of it is that these things tend to flow into each other, and things that like your genes express themselves over the course of the lifetime of your lifetime in certain ways, depending on your upbringing, depending on your personality, there's a long debates on sort of like how fixed personality is versus how like changeable, how fixed is one person's brain versus how changeable it is. Some people's brains are less fixed than others. Some people's like the way your genes express themselves can differ based on experiences you have. It doesn't mean that your genes are different. It's just the way that they express themselves, the way that they manifest, and then and so much of reality is based on perception, and so much of perception is based on like societal definitions of things and language. So if you want to have a real conversation about it, it takes a long time, and it's not that fun, to be honest. It's a lot of like unpacking. I was a philosophy major. It's like you could spend a whole course like unpacking 15 things, and then you get into like, free will, and you get into all, determinism, and you get into all these like, it's like, oh God. And I don't mean to put down the question between the ropes. I really appreciate the question. It takes I'm someone who like has to, like, if I'm going to open my mouth, I like to answer things fully. Unlike this guy who just said, what did you say? Nurture. No, you said nature. You're on the nature side.
Nature. Born collectors. Yeah.
For sure. All right. Can you all talk about certain individuals cornering the market?
There's a lot of traps in chat. There's a lot of traps in chat.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I will say about this is like, I have videos you can go back in my channel, like about 2 years ago, on market manipulation, shilling. The way that I handled this is I made videos trying to educate people on like the ways that people could manipulate you and take advantage of you in the market. I am not the internet detective who is going to go out there unless something is so obvious and I'm so sure, or something happens directly to me that I have like direct knowledge of. It's very unlikely I'll be talking about things directly, because I just think it's like, I don't like, internet journalism and internet detectiveness is like it's blowing up right now in the YouTube space because it's like it's interesting and it's fascinating, but like a lot of it's bullshit. Excuse my language. Like a lot of it's just bullshit because it's really just like a guy at his computer who like doesn't really do much research and just like asks some people and they give him some info and then he kind of hears what he wants to hear and then he kind of comes out with a strong take, and that strong take is like 50% of the time right, 50% of the time wrong. When he's right, he looks like a genius. When he's wrong, he looks like an idiot, but then he just like moves on and people focus on where they're a genius. It's a lot of it's bullshit. So but a lot of it isn't, probably but where it's bullshit and where it isn't is hard. The best thing you can do is protect yourself and become educated. These are real things. Like scams can happen, manipulation can happen, people can steal, people can fake stuff. I do like when any of these channels like do go after very specific, very obvious things and help educate. And there have been a number of videos, like Rattle's had a number of really good videos, like Educate, for example. Like Rattle's one example of a channel who does some of this type of stuff, right? Like he does a lot of things. Like he does like every type of content, but one type of content he does is like call out scams. And there have been a number of good ones where it's very specific, it's very obvious, and he's warned a lot of people. I think about his like the TopZone. That was a good one. Like there were some videos there that was like he was showing like fake TopZone cards in real slabs. Like just be aware of that. Be aware that like these are hard to cash. Like the grading companies are missing them. Those types of things are great. Are individuals out there shilling and trying to take advantage of people? Absolutely. What percentage? I don't know. I can tell you that I check when I'm bidding on big things and when I'm trying to figure out the value, or like when I do my Patreon things, I go, and say what things are worth. I go in and I check and to see if I think it looks legit. And if I think the people, who bought it actually want it, was it relisted, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, that isn't necessarily a scam. Sometimes people just buy and then have buyer's remorse and they just don't want to pay. Like, people can jump to like really bad conclusions, blah, 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 blah. Anything you want to add on this? This is like your favorite topic in the hobby, Dan, I know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Dan's like man. He's always talking about, and he thinks everyone's a scammer, and he loves it when people are scammers.
It's very easy to get people to pick up their pitchforks and light their torches. People love a good witch hunt.
Yeah, and when someone calls someone out for scamming, I'm interested. I watch. I tend to engage in. I tend to see, and some of the time I think, oh, there's some really good evidence, and then other times I think, what? There's basically no evidence. This was all just speculation and a ramble rant. And even when there's a lot of evidence, I still don't fully I'm not like pitchfork time. I'm like, oh, that's quite a bit of evidence. Let's see if there's another side to this. And honestly, a lot of the time, it really has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
It doesn't impact me at all. It doesn't impact my life. It doesn't impact my area of the hobby. If it did, I'd probably care more. And if it affects you or impacts you, you should care and you should learn to protect yourself. And my responsibility is to treat everyone with respect and not scam people, and that's what I do. So I think fundamentally, if you take care of yourself and you treat people well, that's going to be that is less likely to do harm than calling out the pitchforks, when often the pitchforks are going after someone who doesn't deserve it, probably, or it's just like over the top or unhelpful or whatever. But that's my opinion. But I agree. I mean, some of these videos, like they go after like an influencer that I really don't like. And I'm like, yeah, get that guy. Like I like on a personal level, I feed into the drama, even though I know that it's not good for the hobby. I know this video I'm watching is bad for the hobby. I know that this person's being unfair, but because I personally don't really like this influencer, because I've met them in person, I just don't find that, I just find them annoying, or they've done something to a friend of mine. I know something behind the scenes. I just really don't like the person. It makes me happy, but I know that's a bad instinct.
Yeah, definitely. Oh God.
That's why we need to go on Basics channel to talk about
drama. Drama is bags. Certified bags.
Let's see. All right, Dan, you're gonna pick 2 more questions and then we're gonna call it.
Oh God.
I'm giving you the stream to end it.
There's a lot of memes. There's a lot of memes in there. Let me see. I don't even know if there's 2 valid questions in the last hour.
It's just a bunch. It's just a derailed nonsense in the chat.
I don't think you caught on, but the one you highlighted, the second half, they were just trying to get you. It wasn't a real question.
What question?
The one that's currently highlighted. Oh.
I mean, honestly, like, who knows at this point? Okay, so this was that Philip stuff earlier, which I'm hoping is not another nonsense. Gotcha. It easily could be at this point.
I'm assuming it is. I don't know, though.
Right. A controversial video removed to protect medical licenses about investing heavily into Pokemon. I equate it to venture capital returns for my patients. Many of my patients have seen success.
I'm assuming that's just a meme. I don't know. It's 2 a.m. I have no idea.
I don't know what to make of that, Philip. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's definitely nonsense. I mean, this comment is like, 95% nonsense. But then his next comment.
There's follow up. Yeah.
Yeah. Like 8.9 Sharp ratio on my Pokemon assets over the last year.
Here's a question very recently, 2 minutes ago, by John Doe. If you were in charge of PSA, what would you change beside quicker returns? I truly think, and it's probably not a popular take. I think a lot of people wouldn't like this take.
Sorry, which one? Let me just put it up. Which one?
It was at 156 by John Doe. If you were in charge of PSA, what would you change besides quicker returns? I truly, if I'm Nat Turner, if I'm like the guy on the board, I would say sub $10 is not necessarily our goal. Maximum profit for the short, medium, and long term is our goal. And I think that going to 20 million cards a year, which Nat has actually thrown that specific number out at sub $10, I think that inundates the economy, the market with too many slabs. I think there's a lot more profit to be found staying at 12 to 15 and only doing 10 million a year, because 2 things happen when you double the amount of cards, right? You need to lower the price to make the demand for slabs come up. Like the lower you go, the more people will put in plastic. The more people put in plastic, though, drives the price on all those things down further. So like grading 10 million a year, I don't know what the magic number is, the magic rate and price, but the most beneficial thing for PSA is certainly not maximum slabs on the market. There's certainly a higher price they can charge at a lower volume that maximizes their returns. And I would put all my resources into finding out that optimal number. And I don't think it's sub 10, and I don't think it's north of 20 million a year.
Yeah, I think about this like if I were working at these companies, like what I would do. And like even if I had access to all of their info, I still feel like it's so hard to speculate on like what's going to happen. Like it's a
difficult optimization problem.
So difficult. And like
but
if they
overshoot too drastically, like they could kill a lot of it.
Yeah, and the amount of employees to hire. Now, PSA has a larger, because they can overdo it. They could hire too many people. They could keep it too high, or they could lower it too much. And the immediate effect would be just to put their competitors out of business, which could be a benefit to them. And then they can consolidate and be in a better position. So like PSA has a lot. So like, honestly, if you were the other grading companies, like the secondary, now CGC has a huge parent company that makes a lot of money in all of their other grading. They're going to be fine. But like, Beckett, I've heard, has a lot of money behind it, but like things like SGC and like, I don't know. It's hard to imagine like how these, it makes me nervous. All that stuff makes me nervous. Hopefully they have really, really good margins and they have like cash reserves and all that types of thing, these companies. Me personally, what I hope PSA does is, I think 15 is good. I think 15 is low enough that a lot of modern can keep being graded, which can keep sort of a nice balance in the hobby, but not your like regular V. Like I think it takes out the sort of like regular hollow, regular V, like, and I think that's probably better for the hobby overall.
I think they should never go sub 10 again. I mean, barring some major shift
Yeah.
where they have to years down the line, but I think going sub 10, like they have a cost. I don't know what the cost of their product is, but it costs them some amount of money for the plastic, for the overhead, putting it in the plastic. If I had to guess, $3 maybe, $3, high profit margins. If you're selling it for 15, you're making 12. If you go all the way down to 8, well, if you go down to like 10, basically the amount that you come down, you can drop the price 50%, but you might be dropping your profit margin by 80%, right? Because that cost becomes a more substantial amount. So I still think I'm going to win my bet with James. I still think they won't go sub 10 this year. They might not go sub 10 ever again. It could get to where they have to, but I think overall underproduction is usually the profit maximizing strategy for a monopoly. And PSA doesn't have a monopoly. There's BGS, there's PSA, but same thing goes for Pokemon too. If I were Pokemon, I would go towards the side of like scarcity. I would go towards the side of like $200 booster boxes, slightly underproduced, keep people hungry, keep people ravenous for it. If you overproduce, if you go too far, slabs, cards, anything, it can get ugly, especially if the economy gets ugly. That would be my main consideration.
Okay, one more question, Dan, and then we're done. You pick. This is the last question, no matter what. We got a tip. Let's hear it for these legends that are above us.
You guys do make it hard work. I mean,
like you make it exhausting trying to find real questions. I know they're in there somewhere.
Very, very difficult.
Yeah, and by the Basic said he'll have us on his channel next week.
Nice.
Yeah, everyone come on.
Oh man.
Are you gonna put together a reel though? You gotta put together the 10 most drama videos of the year for us to react to.
Yeah, I don't know what those would be, but I need to stock up on alcohol.
Exactly.
There's really very few questions. Let me see.
All right. If you do that, if you complete, I'm putting out a bounty.
Uh-oh.
Okay. First person to complete every. Oops, did I just freeze?
You froze a little bit. Your video, not your audio, though.
Right on the bounty. Yeah, first person to put together a 1 to 10 shiny set of every baby shiny in Hidden Fates and send it to me. How much would they get, Dan, for your bounty for that?
You must be trying to inundate PSA. You must be trying to build that backlog again.
It's like
putting out this challenge.
$1,000 bounty.
Oh God.
How big would it need to be for people to actually do it?
I have no idea. There's probably people already halfway there. Cameron's asking one that we already touched on, but
it's going to be tough.
Cameron's asking one that we touched on. I said in 10 years. 10 years is easier, I feel. 1 year, there can be so much more.
Which one are we doing?
He's asking about Umbreon Altar.
All right.
Where would it be in a year? I say over in a year. Because irrationality can last longer than you can remain solvent, all that stuff. I think I'm bullish for the next year on the market remaining kind of crazy on a lot of things. 10 years, I'm going to say at 500 in 2023 dollars or under. I would go at or under in 10 years. 1 year though, I think over. But that's not like a strongly held guess. That's not like, yeah, that's 50-50. I could go either way, but I'm going to say over.
All right. Let's have a quick conversation about the Moonbryon, and then we'll end it.
You got to end with Moonbryon.
Okay. Now we have Medici questions. Perfect.
Basic, you should have been quicker. I would have ended there. But Jake said one question. We can't take more.
Okay, we're going to bed for real.
Yeah. Have a good night, everyone.
We'll see you on Basics channel. Go subscribe to Basic. This
Live
channel
after party on Basics.
A funnel to Basics channel. That's now the goal of this channel.
Get him to 10K.
Yeah, Mason, can you post his channel one more time? Max just jumped in. Max jumps in all the time in the last 3 seconds of my stream.
When you see Max jumps in, it's like, yeah, we went too late.
Too late.
Oh right. Man.
Appreciate you all. Take care.
Have a good night, everyone. Good morning, Max.